Welcome back to the PFF NFL show as we are continuing our free agency coverage here on the YouTube channel. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Dalton Wasserman. Doing everything that we did yesterday, honestly, just times two. You know, a lot of major signings that happened after we signed off on yesterday's show. To be honest with you, we almost thought about just starting the stream back up. We weren't able to do that, but so much news broke even after we did our show yesterday that we just get to talk about today with you guys and the good people in the chat. So many of you guys were in here yesterday. I hope we get the same amount today because it was a lot of fun. We talked about a lot of our favorite signings, and today we get to continue to do that, but we get to expand it a little bit. Dalton, now that we're 2 days into this thing, now a lot of teams have gotten involved, not just for the top guys, but for some depth on their roster as well. So we get to sort of talk about adjusted team needs when it comes to the NFL draft. We get to talk about our favorite hauls overall because now we're starting to build full free agency hauls for some of these teams. It's going to be a jam-packed show, my friend. How you doing today?
Oh, fantastic. The whirlwind just continues, right? You get the last 18 hours. And you know the one thing that stands out to me, dude, does it feel like this year's trade market has been more fun than ever with trades just coming up out of nowhere, especially with contending teams?
Dude, it feels like this. I don't want to say every year, but like the wide receiver position, in my opinion, is always one that sort of like gets the league going. Like these veteran wide receivers, for one reason or another, whether it's they want out, whether the teams want to move on from them, whatever. It's almost like we always get wide receivers. And then after that, it does seem to be a little bit of a snowball. And then we get into free agency, and then we get deals like the Laremy Tunsil deal, which we get to freak out about. And we'll analyze all that, the return that the Houston Texans got there, him going to the Washington Commanders, all of that good stuff. So we're not just analyzing the trades, but everything that's happening this week. So we will get into all of that. Just like we did yesterday, we will have our friends behind the glass. I believe it's Quinn who's doing it today, producer Quinn, who will be shouting out all of the live moves that we have here on the show. And just when you thought it was maybe starting to quiet down a little bit, boom, Will Fries, 5 years, $88 million. And so it just reminded you that we're still cooking with gas, as they say here in free agency. Quinn, you up for the task? Eli was doing a good job yesterday, but now it's in your hands, my friend.
Go Bengals. That's all I got.
There it is.
Short and sweet.
got.
Very simple message.
I hope Trey Henderson doesn't get dealt on this show because I hope that he doesn't have to say those words.
Well, no, it would be good for the numbers. It would be good for the SEO.
Look at this. Look at the company, man. His own team would be going to the gates of hell, and he's like, you know what? Brings in a couple of extra viewers. That's all right. That's a true company, man. Hopefully the big boss man, Chris Collinsworth, is listening to that. Dalton, I want to start with a team that's very near and dear to your heart because this deal happened, I believe, moments after we logged off yesterday, or maybe it was the very end of the show and we touched on it. No, I believe that the Darnold deal was the last thing that we talked about yesterday. And then shortly after that, the Justin Fields domino did fall, and it fell to the New York Jets, your New York Jets. So I want to talk about Justin Fields and a couple of the other quarterbacks that ended up making moves yesterday. But first of all, how do you feel? Justin Fields going to the New York Jets. What's your thoughts here?
I think the one prevailing thought that I have is obviously it's not a long-term deal, just 2 years, $40 million, 30 guaranteed. If one of the top two quarterbacks for any reason were on the board at number 7 overall in the draft, I would hope this wouldn't preclude them from taking one of them, right? I think that's the biggest thing for me. Now, I'm starting to feel like both of those guys are going to go in the top 3 or 4 anyway. It might not matter, but no, it's a flyer to take on a young guy with a lot of experience, right? And he played at least decent football with Pittsburgh last year, 65.7 passing grade, 76.8 rushing grade. We know he can run the football, and I think just to have a functional starter in there, obviously, is something of value to Aaron Glenn and the Jets right now, right? I mean, your plan cannot be going into the season a 35, 36-year-old Tyrod Taylor as your starter, and I get that. That makes a lot of sense. He certainly fits the mold of a veteran backup better. So Fields gets one more chance behind what's a pretty good offensive line. He gets his college teammate Garrett Wilson back. He's got Breece Hall and Braylon Allen in the backfield. Certainly you'd expect the Jets to run the football a lot if Fields is their starter, right? And that was the case in Pittsburgh early in the year, the first 6 games of last year. So I think, look, It's very unlikely to be the long-term, savior move that Jets fans are always looking for. I think it really, after a hot first 3 games throwing the ball, it started to slow down, and that's why the Steelers went to Russell Wilson over Justin Fields. And obviously in this scenario, the Jets gave him pretty good money, all things considered, and he felt a little bit slighted by the Steelers. And I think that's the other angle to this is, where do the Steelers go from here? Is it Aaron Rodgers? Do they pivot back to Russell Wilson? And they really are a team without a long-term plan at quarterback right now. But as far as the Jets go, that's really the one thing I keep thinking is, if there were one of those quarterbacks available at number 7 overall in the draft, I would just hope that they are not so committed to Fields and have all their eggs in that basket that they would still be willing to select one, even if Fields is the day 1 starter this season.
Yeah, I don't think that, I do think there's a chance that Shedeur certainly gets to them at number 7. I don't think that they would pull the trigger on Shedeur Sanders at number 7. I think this becomes now more of a conversation of who they might draft a little bit later, whether it's the 2nd round, 3rd round, whatever that is. Do you think that this now increases the chances for Jalen Milroe to be that pick for them? Because I just don't think that they're going to take a quarterback at number 7. I think they're freeing themselves up. I think this move really frees them up to do whatever they want at number 7, which is probably what they wanted to do all along. Do you think it makes it more likely that when we get into, I think they would hope round 3, the quarterbacks that they would have at their disposal to pick, if Jalen Milroe is there, do you think that they sort of stick with that archetype now that they have Justin Fields, they have Tyrod Taylor, and then getting a younger Jalen Milroe as well? What do you think about that connection there?
I don't know that it would be Milroe. It's hard to tell with a new staff what type of quarterback they're looking for, right? I think they really saw Fields as the best option available amongst really what's a very veteran free agent crop, right? It doesn't really help them in the long term at all to keep an Aaron Rodgers, to go with Russell Wilson, or even to start Tyrod Taylor, who's already there. I think the fact that Fields was a little bit younger, and maybe, just maybe, there's that small chance that he could be your quarterback for several years if he really plays up. But I think somewhere in round 3 or 4, it could be Milroe. You could be talking Will Howard. There's rumors that they really like Kyle McCord out of Syracuse. It certainly could be somebody like that, but I wouldn't guarantee that it's Milroe just because they went out inside Fields. I don't think we know for sure that that's what the Jets are going for. I just think they felt like Fields was the youngest and best option for them right now among this free agent crop. I don't know that they're necessarily looking for a player like Justin Fields and the way that you would run an offense with him long term.
Low moving costs if they get Kyle McCord.
Also true, right across the state.
Very low moving costs. You got to think about that when you're budgeting for the team. So it's really important. Now, I'm excited about Justin Fields, and I am excited for him to get, I think, a legitimate shot at a starting quarterback gig. And last year, yeah, he started out the year as the starting quarterback for the Steelers, but there were some rumblings behind the scenes where it was like, okay, well, they were winning with Justin Fields, but then they very quickly kind of went to Russell Wilson once, things started to stall out, and it was almost like they didn't really give Justin Fields that full leash to be able to have a little bit of like, okay, here was the peak. All right, now it's going down a little bit, but it could jump back up. They didn't really give him that timing. And there were some reports out there that was like, okay, well, Russell either had it in his contract or there was just a verbal agreement that like the starting job was his. And so when he was hurt to start the season, obviously he couldn't do that. But then once he was healthy again, they went over to him pretty quickly. I wonder how much of a fair shot, if you will, Justin Fields really had to just go through the ups and downs of being a starting quarterback in this league. He gets that with the New York Jets. Certainly Tyrod Taylor being there and a veteran, they can lean on Tyrod if they believe that he gives them the best chance to win football games. But I think Justin Fields now goes into this situation, certainly depending on what happens in the draft, as their QB1, as their starter for next year. And I'm excited for it because last year what we saw with the Steelers was his most efficient year yet. And so for me, I love this fit. I love this move. I think it's the right bet to make for the New York Jets, taking a chance on still a young, talented quarterback to see what we have here and now his 3rd stop in the NFL. And most importantly, it frees you up to do whatever you want at number 7. The other quarterback moves, we got Zach Wilson on a 1-year deal going over to the Miami Dolphins. Then we got a Kenny Pickett trade over to Cleveland. Any thoughts on either of those deals? Kenny Pickett's now QB1 in Cleveland. I don't know if people realize that or not, but Deshaun Watson re-injuring the Achilles. Jameis Winston's not there anymore. I think they still have Bailey Zappi, but Kenny Pickett is now QB1 for Cleveland if things were to start right now for them. So Your thoughts on either of those moves from the quarterback position before we move on to some other guys?
No, I think you're right. It's something I didn't even think about really until you mentioned it before the show, and producer Tyler behind the glass is a little irritated with it. But no, I mean, if Kenny Pickett, if that's the shot he's going to get, I mean, good luck to him. I mean, especially right now with the way the Browns' offensive line and their entire offensive situation looks right now. So I do think there is a chance. Do we still think with this, if Pickett's going to be at least something of maybe possibly the only move they make in this free agency period if they don't bring back a Jameis Winston or somebody like that? You've been mentioning already that you think the floor for Cam Ward in this draft is number 2 to the Browns. Are we feeling even more about that it's going to be Cam Ward if Tennessee doesn't select him first, that he would be the 2nd overall pick in Cleveland, and maybe comes in and loosely competes with Kenny Pickett early? Maybe they start Pickett for a few weeks as a veteran. We've seen other teams do that in the past and then transition to Ward. I mean, are we feeling like it's more and more that the Browns are going to go quarterback with the 2nd overall pick?
If Ward is there, right? And I think this move, the intriguing part of the Kenny Pickett move to me, is more about the aggression that they would have to move up to number 1 overall versus staying at number 2. Because without this move, I would have thought, all right, maybe it's on the table if they really want Cam Ward, especially after that massive Myles Garrett contract that we talked about yesterday. You're still navigating the Deshaun Watson money, so we'll see what happens with that, how much that can be freed up with his most recent injury, whether it was at the facility or whether it was something that was unsanctioned. We'll see. But you're paying Myles Garrett now $40 million a year, so that cap's going to go somewhere. The best way to mitigate that is get a quarterback who's on a rookie contract. So to me, it becomes now even more important for them to get Cam Ward, but does the Kenny Pickett signing make them feel like, hey, if Cam Ward gets to us at 2, great. If he doesn't, we got plenty of flexibility to make sure that we're aggressive for a quarterback the following season. So I don't know. I don't think the Kenny Pickett moves the needle that much, but maybe they feel more comfortable about it and waiting for next year's quarterback class. We'll see. I think that's the intriguing part to me. Wait, somebody in the chat said, PFF, we have a Brock Bowers at home. Which one? Andrew, what are you talking about for that? I'm reading the chat because I loved reading the chat yesterday. So we're gonna go through that a bunch. Justin's also, before we move on to the next position, because I do want to talk about Laremy Tunsil next, because that was a big earth-shattering move yesterday. We talked about the DK Metcalf trade yesterday, as we were talking about a lot of different domino moves with Geno, going to the Raiders, and then what the Seahawks are sort of doing. We talked about this with the Sam Darnold trade. Justin said, Trevor, what are your thoughts on the Metcalf trade if the Steelers traded Pickens for more than a 2nd-round pick? Well, what I said yesterday, and a big reason why, as of right now, I'm not the biggest fan of the DK Metcalf trade, is you traded a 2nd-round pick, number 52 overall, nearly a premium pick, and signed a guy to $30 million per year average on a 5-year deal just to have more of the same skill set that you already had. And so I'm sort of skeptical about how much return on investment you're really getting for the price that you pay to get Metcalf. Not that Metcalf's not a great player. We said this yesterday. I think he is. But it's the business of how we got him into Pittsburgh that I wasn't really a fan of. If you're able to trade George Pickens for, he says, more than a 2nd-round pick, I don't think it's going for more than a 2nd-round pick. Even if you were to get like a 2nd or a 3rd for George Pickens, all of a sudden, of course, that gets easier to stomach because now you are just getting probably a player that you think is an upgrade to that archetype of wide receiver and a more proven guy in DK Metcalf, and you're obviously moving on from George Pickens and could use that pick elsewhere. And now they made some additions to wide receiver, obviously with DK Metcalf, and they brought in Darius Slay to help another major weakness that they had at the cornerback position. It sort of now just depends on what they're going to do at QB and how they're able to surround the rest of the roster by whoever is going to play quarterback for Pittsburgh. So obviously I like the DK Metcalf move a lot more if you are able to get something back for George Pickens. So that's sort of my thoughts there. All right, let's get into Laremy Tunsil, because I feel like we got to touch on the Laremy Tunsil trade. He's been one of the most efficient, I feel, pass protectors in the game really for a long, long time now. Houston lets him go to the Commanders for it's sort of a lot to follow here. So the Texans traded Laremy Tunsil and a 4th-round pick this year. So Tunsil and a 4th-round pick go to the Commanders in exchange for a 3rd-round pick this year, a 7th-round pick this year, a 2nd-round pick next year, and a 4th-round pick next year. So all in all, essentially this deal is a little bit of a pick swap there in this year's draft, going from the 4th round to the 3rd round. This is for the Texans. And then you get an additional 7th round pick, you get an additional 2nd round pick next year, and you get an additional 4th round pick next year. So it's a good price for Laremy Tunsil going over. And I think a lot of people go, whoa, hold on. Stroud was running for his life last year. And now you're going to get rid of his best offensive lineman and their left tackle in Tunsil. After that move was made, we sort of heard some rumblings that, maybe Tunsil wasn't quite the leader of the O-line room that they wanted him to be. Sounds like they kind of wanted to just turn the page and get a little bit younger on the offensive line anyways. Dalton, what are your thoughts on the Texans even being willing to move on from Laremy Tunsil, the trade compensation, and then a little bit of maybe the reason why of how we got here with the Houston Texans? What do you think?
I think this is a massive, massive win for the Commanders. You got a potential all-pro level left tackle, the 2nd highest graded pass blocking tackle over the last 6 years, 4th highest graded tackle in pass protection this season. You got him without giving up either of your first 2 picks in this year's draft. You essentially did a pick swap that moves you down roughly 50 spots from the 3rd into the 4th round. And basically, you have the swap, and out of this year's draft, you're giving up a 7th round pick. Obviously, the 2026 picks are what they are, but the Commanders expect to contend again. That might not hurt you as much as you might think. I think it's fantastic for the Commanders. I know it's a pretty decent return, especially when it comes to 2026 for the Texans, but I think this is pretty lopsided. I don't know, obviously what goes on with Tunsil behind the scenes in the Texans locker room or what have you, but the fact that the Commanders now get that level of player going into his age 31 season to protect their young quarterback, Jaden Daniels, and really give you an anchor on that offensive line that they were missing. They were 22nd in pass blocking grade this year, and it was getting worse as the season went on, and they dealt with injuries. And even, obviously, we know Sam Cosmi got hurt in the postseason and could miss a good amount or all of this next year. So I think it's a game-changing move for Washington. You look at the additions on their offense now of Laremy Tunsil. You look at Deebo Samuel. Maybe they could use one more weapon. Maybe they delve in for some running back depth in the draft. But I don't know how you couldn't like this for Washington. And as far as the Texans go, you have to be legitimately worried about this for C.J. Stroud, right? I mean, the 1+ pass protector they had up front is now gone, and there's no immediate thought on a replacement for him. I mean, we have to assume now for the next 6 weeks, every single mock draft we do is going to have the Texans taking a left tackle, right?
Yeah, and I think that they could get aggressive for one.
Right? They certainly could. They have more capital to work with now, so if they wanted to move up, where are they at now? 25. If they wanted to move up 10, 12, 15 spots to go get one of the top 3 guys I think about when you think about Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks, and Armand Membu, they may have to make a move like that, right? If they dip into that high second tier for a Josh Simmons or Josh Connerly, look, I like those players, but you're talking about Laremy Tunsil. You're talking about a top 5 pass protector in the entire league. It's going to be a downgrade when you think about what Tunsil gave them already. And you're already talking about the other 4 spots where a struggle in pass protection, especially the interior. I'm very, very worried about this for Houston's offense, both in the passing game and even in the run game, where Tunsil had the highest run blocking grade of his career this year. So there must have really been something going on behind the scenes with this, or he wanted an extension, and it's like we've seen with several other guys around the league, and the Texans just weren't willing or maybe weren't able to pay it because their salary cap situation isn't great. But I think it's a massive win for the Commanders. The fact that they keep both their 1st and 2nd round pick this year, they only lose a net of 1 draft pick this year. They've got the Commanders have some serious potential, man. If they can get a few more pieces on this defense, I think that's where the focus is going to be in the draft, unless there's a receiver that they really like early on that's still available to them. But they just keep getting it right. Obviously, we talked about the puzzling Javon Kinlaw signing, but outside of that, especially on offense, the Commanders are in a really, really good spot to compete next year.
Yeah, Walt's asking how much does Tunsil saving the Texans in cap space by just looking it up at over the cap. If you select him being traded before June 1st, it does give them a cap saving of $21 million. So it gives them a little bit extra to work with. And like you said, it gives them those extra draft picks. So it's sort of tough to look at this trade from the Texans' perspective and be okay with it unless you really believe that this was sort of like a culture and a locker room thing, which we have heard reports of people who are, in Houston and covering that team. Lance Zierlein is one of them who he does a good job, like being based out of Houston and knowing that team really well. He's like, look, I'm not surprised by this. I'm not surprised by this at all because we've sort of heard rumblings. Now, when you look at just straight up production, pass blocking grades last season, Laremy Tunsil, 89.1 for this offensive line. And then you got Titus Howard at 74.9. Then it's Shaq Mason at 63.6. Juice Scruggs is 62.1. Jared Patterson, 69.9. And then Kenyon Green, a 39.7. Blake Fisher, a 46.7. And then Kendrick Green, a 19.4. So there's no doubt about it that Laremy Tunsil was the best pass protector on this team. And they're going to have to do something drastic. And I agree. I think we should now be looking at Houston as a team that's going to get really aggressive to go up and get an offensive lineman. Because here's the thing. If you're moving on from Laremy Tunsil, you're not just drafting an offensive lineman, right? Like, that's not what's going to happen here. You're going to draft the offensive lineman that you want, or else this doesn't make any sense. Because if you were going to roll the dice on a player, you would have rolled the dice on a player who's already over the last 10 years proven that he's been one of the best pass protectors in the league at left tackle. You can't just say, well, yeah, we need an offensive tackle. Let's just sit at 25 and, maybe somebody will fall to us. Josh Connerly fell to us. Yeah, that's okay. We're fine with that. You bet. What I think the Texans are going to do in the draft now is they're going to go, we want to come out of this with Armand Membou or Josh Simmons. And I'm throwing out two names just as an example. They've done the interview process. Those guys fit the talent ceiling that they want to be worthy of a first-round pick to be able to start at left tackle for them, and also the character. The locker room character being somebody that they can invest in. That's the only way that this makes sense for the Texans. Because if not, you are playing with fire about an offensive line for a stud young quarterback who is now about halfway through his rookie deal. So to me, there is a world where this works out for the Texans, but you are playing with fire here of what you need to do next. And I think that they acquired a lot of draft to make them pretty flexible to go up and get whoever they want there. Shout out Ben, PFF Ben, who's in the chat. He said, gentlemen, howdy. What's up? Just saying hello to everybody in the chat. Whoever says hello to us, I'll say hello back. Vikings. A lot of fans, a lot of people in the chat, speaking of the chat, talking about the Minnesota Vikings. And I do want to touch on the Vikings because I really like their haul. Now, you guys can see exactly what the Minnesota Vikings did. If you go over to pff.com, you can look at the free agency tracker. It's got everything there for you. If you want to say, man, I wonder what edge rushers are left for there to be signed, you could sort by edge rusher, you could sort by position. Or if you want to say, oh man, okay, he's shouting out the Vikings. Who did they get in this class? Well, you could scroll all the way down and you could sort it by team as well. You can go right to the Minnesota Vikings. We got the Will Fries deal that happened this morning. John Allen deal as well. They signed Ryan Kelly yesterday. They brought back Aaron Jones. They brought back Byron Murphy Jr. as well. So they've been busy. Vikings fans are asking, Dalton, how do you feel about the Vikings haul here now adding some interior offensive line pieces and an interior defensive line piece, two areas that they really needed to address going into this season?
Yeah, I think this was kind of the consequence, or I should say a good consequence of not re-signing Sam Darnold, right? Because you can take all that money you would have given him and you can distribute it to other parts of your team, right? I'll start with the offensive line part of it. Ryan Kelly and Will Fries both coming over from the Colts, and this is about pass protection, interior pass protection. They were not getting, for years now, they haven't gotten good enough pass protection from guys like Garrett Bradbury and Ed Ingram and guys on the inside there. So no matter who your quarterback is, and it's likely now to be J.J. McCarthy, you have to be able to protect him, right? And Kelly brings an upgrade over Bradbury with that. Will Fries at right guard, as long as he's healthy, was having a breakout season last year, and you can see the Vikings clearly believe in the breakout with the amount of money they gave to him, $88 million in total, I believe it was. So you're talking about an offensive line now that looks completely different, and I think the biggest thing is the upgrade in pass protection, and I think Fries and Kelly are both going to have an easy time adjusting to Kevin O'Connell's run schemes. On the defensive side, I look at Javon Hargrave, I look at Jonathan Allen. You think about pass rush, right? And the Vikings were a bottom 5 interior pass rush team last year. Great off the edges, Andrew Van Ginkel, Jonathan Grenard, Dallas Turner, right? But they need more on the inside, more push on the inside. And obviously, again, we talked about yesterday with the Eagles having the best interior pass rush in football and just winning a Super Bowl, everybody's trying to copy that now, right? And we know Hargrave and Allen are 2 proven pass rushers. And I think it doesn't prevent them if, say, a Kenneth Grant or another run stopper that they like on the inside, a Walter Nolan, if one of those guys is there at number 24 overall in the draft as a run stopper, I think it's still fully on the board that they could take a defensive tackle because it would be really good to rotate somebody in on early downs with Hargrave and Allen here to stop the run, and then you get these 2 on the field, and you have a serious problem trying to block a front 4 of Hargrave, Allen, Van Ginkel, and Jonathan Grenard, plus all the blitz packages that Brian Flores gives. So I really like these 2 moves on the defensive line as well, and I think an underrated signing for me that we didn't get to talk about yesterday, I really like them going and getting Isaiah Rodgers from the Eagles. He was kind of their third outside corner behind Darius Slay and Quinyon Mitchell. He had the gambling suspension. He missed all of 2023, but he bounced back with a pretty good this year, a little over 400 snaps. Anytime he's been on the field, either for the Colts or Philadelphia, he's been a good player, plus they re-signed Byron Murphy. So I'm looking at it being possible that Murphy and Rodgers are the 2 starting outside corners. You've got Allen and Hargrave at defensive tackle. They need to fix a safety spot. They're losing Cam Bynum. I don't know that we've heard anything about Harrison Smith yet, about either him returning or going anywhere else. I haven't seen anything on him yet, but I think the safety position now becomes a priority as far as their defense, and I still think a run stopper shouldn't be excluded from that conversation at defensive tackle early in the draft.
I don't think Harrison Smith's not a free agent.
I thought, yes, he is. Yep.
He is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
right.
that was like a big thing. Is both their starting safeties, actually, like almost their whole starting secondary.
They're secondary for sure. But
yeah.
Going back to you talking about, okay, well, they've got the flexibility to now draft whoever they want at the back end of the first round. We've talked about this before with the Vikings, that it would have to be a prospect that they really loved at 25. And I think what is more likely now, when I see what they have done in free agency, because some people look at, oh, maybe they overpaid a little bit for Byron Murphy. The number of what Will Fry, like $88 million 5 years for Will Fries. I think a lot of people are like, whoa, okay, that's a lot of money for Will Fries. But if you break it down, it's actually a pretty good contract for them. They were able to get Ryan Kelly a little bit cheaper as well. So I like a lot of the moves. I think John Allen got probably top of market of whatever he was going to get coming off 2 down years for the Commanders. But I do still think that it was a good move and a good bet for the Vikings to make. Ultimately, and we talk about how free agency really sets up the draft, I just love how it sets up the Vikings to navigate the draft the way that they want to. Because as of right now, they've got 4 picks in this draft. They pick at 25, 24?
24. You have 24, 97, 140, and 161.
It's 24 and then it's 97. You don't want 4 draft picks anyways. And because they're moving up for J.J. McCarthy, moving up for Dallas Turner last year, the bill was coming due around this time. They didn't want to make it so, we got a glaring need an interior defensive line. We can't move back in the first round. I instead now think this is the opposite. It's not that this just frees them up to do what they want at 25 when it comes to best player available. In my opinion, it frees them up at 25 to basically tell the entire NFL, we are open for business. Somebody come up to where we're at number 24 and come into the second round and maybe get a quarterback, maybe go up and get one of these good interior defensive linemen or pass rushers or corners or something, because they're looking to trade back now. They feel good about the 2 interior defensive line additions, the 2 interior offensive line additions, being okay in the secondary, because in the secondary, they've got Byron Murphy, obviously, who they brought back. They have Isaiah Rodgers, who you touched on, who could play outside for them. But then they've also got Mekhi Blackmon, who I think bringing back Murphy and signing Rodgers, it gives them a comfortable environment to say, all right, yeah, we could scoot Blackmon in there into one of those starting spots at corner, and we could feel good about it. So I like what the Vikings are doing here. You're losing the quarterback in Sam Darnold, but I think that they went about this free agency the right way to free themselves up for the draft to do what they needed to do. So there you go. That's my thoughts on the Minnesota Vikings. Somebody earlier in the chat, I'm trying to keep up with the chat as much as possible. Wow. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson got traded to Houston Texans? Whoa. Is that real? We get that? The chat's blowing up about it. Chat,
sure looks like it. Quinn, what do we have on this now? If we have,
So I got it pulled up right here. Give me 1 second. I'll throw it on the screen. But Diana Rossini is saying that the Texans are sending Kenyon Green to the Eagles in exchange for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. The teams are also swapping 5th and 6th round picks in 2026.
So the Eagles are getting the better end of a pick swap, but I'm surprised that Gardner-Johnson is somebody they would give up. Just with the way that's secondary. I mean, they were the best coverage team by far in the league this year, and getting him back was a big part of that.
I agree. What's his contract?
Let me. I'm
looking at this. We're live on the show, folks. This is live action here.
Let me find that now.
We're trying to analyze this literally as it's going on.
The Texans. You have to look at the Texans secondary being. I mean, it's an elite secondary when you look at what they have with Stingley and Lassiter, Petrie, Gardner-Johnson, Kalen Bullock on the back end. I mean, their secondary is absolutely loaded. I'm not even sure they necessarily needed Gardner-Johnson, but
that's what I'm kind of confused about here. Is one, the draft pick compensation is not really that big of a deal. They're basically they're flip-flopping a guy who did not live up to his draft hype in Kenyon Green, and they're getting him off the roster. Going back to this probably continues the trend of overturning the offensive line with Laremy Tunsil as well. Now this move I think goes along those same lines. So moving on from a former first-round pick who just did not live up to where he was selected for you, and you get a really good secondary player. The interesting part to me is that, Houston doesn't really need him. Derek Stingley Jr., Jimmy Ward, Kalen Bullock. When I think of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, he basically does what Jalen Petrie does. And I suppose Jalen Petrie's gone through some injuries, so you want to be okay in that area because instead you got just two lunatics, and I say that in the best way, who just play with their hair on fire.
It's those jokers again. Those jokers keep coming up.
As those nickels defenders. So I love the player. I'm surprised that Houston targeted Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, but maybe they looked at the world that they had to operate under without Jalen Petrie when he was hurt, and that was such a pivotal part of what they wanted to do in their flexibility and their coverage that they said, no, let's go get a player who can kind of do the same thing for us. And now obviously we've seen at a Super Bowl level. So an interesting deal, not one that I would have cooked up as a destination, but something that's very intriguing for both of these sides.
Yeah, for sure. It makes safety for the Eagles an interesting thing too. And I mean, it's not like Gardner-Johnson had a big cap hit, only $5 million this year and $6 million next year. So I don't know if it's a cost-saving thing. Is there anyone on the safety market or that the Eagles, are we going to hear about them in the next hour signing a safety to replace him? Is that what we're going to get? I think there's some interesting elements here. I think as far as the Texans trading away Green, I think you mentioned it. They're just going to filter out this room of anybody they think they don't need in there, and they're going to start over on this offensive line, which, again, I don't feel great about for C.J. Stroud, but I think we have to think about if they're going to start over, then start it over hard and just figure it out as it goes. Obviously, Kenyon Green hadn't been working out, and maybe, obviously, look, Howie Roseman, Jeff Stoutland, the offensive line coach, Nick Sirianni, they can figure out. They're the offensive line gurus of the NFL right now, right? So maybe they see something in Green that the rest of us don't. They still have to replace Mekhi Becton at right guard. Maybe he's going to be a candidate for that, or there'll be an open competition at right guard. But it is odd to me that you would break up I think a very important part of this defense in Gardner-Johnson, he's somebody who's really kind of, maybe the grading isn't always the highest, but I believe he just had his best season, and he's really kind of that, you mentioned it, he kind of one of those lunatics back there, that heart and soul kind of guy that keeps the glue together. And look, I know they're loaded with talent all over their defense. It's just surprising to me that more so that the Eagles would trade Gardner-Johnson for effectively the better part of a pick swap and a flyer on a former first-round pick at guard.
I'll tell you what this move signals the most to me, right? Two things, one on each side. One, Houston was fed the hell up on whatever was going on in their offensive line room last year. Whatever it was, they were fed up and they were moving on and they were making changes no matter what. Two, it's Sidney Brown season, baby. It's Sidney Brown time in Philadelphia. People in the chat are talking about Malachi Starks or Nicky Manwari or maybe going out and signing Justin Reed. Hey, maybe that all could come to fruition. I'm not giving up on my boy Sidney Brown. I loved Sidney Brown coming out of last year's draft. I think he's a stud. I absolutely think that when he is fully healthy, he could step in right away. And he's that same type of player. He plays like a bat out of hell with his hair on fire at all times. He's gone through some injury. Obviously, it's tough to crack that lineup in Philly when it's been so talented over the last couple of years. But to me, I think Sidney Brown is going to step into that slot, that strong safety / nickel defender role for the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think as long as he is healthy, he is going to do so beautifully.
I have a name for you because I'm always thinking about connections, and I'm thinking about Vic Fangio, right? And it's not necessarily the top name on the market, especially at his age, but do we think maybe, is it Justin Simmons? Could that be an option here too?
Yeah, I mean, familiarity, I think that you could certainly bring that into account. Justin Simmons' offseason last year was very interesting because he was a free agent much longer than I thought that he should have been for his talent. And obviously he goes to Atlanta and they're comfortable letting him walk. So I just don't know how the league views Justin Simmons, but clearly I thought he was a really good football player under Vic Fangio. So definitely something to think about there. Next move I want to hit on as we sort of just go about this and what's happened over the last 24 hours and we react to news as it is going on here. Javonte Williams to the Cowboys. Does it move the needle at all for you? I'm not ready to give up on Javonte Williams. I think that Cowboys obviously still need to make some help along their offensive line. Somebody in the chat earlier was saying, will the Cowboys make a signing for more than $6 million average per year? Because they haven't done it since 2016. Greg Hardy is the last time that they did that. So it's just very clearly not a part of the Cowboys' MO and how they go about things. I don't expect them to make any major splashes here as free agency goes on, but they did make an intriguing one with Javonte Williams, the running back from the Broncos, going over to the Dallas Cowboys. I wonder if that version, that UNC version of Javonte is still in there, and maybe I'm just holding on to some false hope with him coming off of the knee injury because he just kind of wasn't that same player, and to be honest, he had every opportunity to be that same player that he was at UNC while he's with the Denver Broncos. And he just didn't get back to form. Clearly, he was just stuck in a running back rotation where he couldn't stand out one way or the other. But in Dallas, I think he'll get a legit shot to be their RB1. I like this fit. I like this flyer. What do you think about Javonte Williams? How much do you think he has left in the tank for Dallas?
I honestly don't really get it. I thought the plan was going to be to re-sign Rico Dowdle, who had a better year than Williams last year, and then go and draft somebody in the mid-rounds to complement him. I guess maybe negotiations with Dowdle haven't gone as well as they've thought, and now they've pivoted to Javonte Williams, who, among backs with 300 carries since 2022, he has the lowest rushing grade in the league. I believe that's a group of 50 running backs, and he's got the lowest rushing grade out of all of them. It's just there's a lack of explosiveness with Javonte, right? And I think that's the issue with the Cowboys' run game anyway. And I don't see their offensive line getting significantly better so far either. They signed Robert Jones from Miami for what's a really backup money. He did a nice job in a starter's role with the Dolphins, but I'm not really getting it. I mean, when I think about the Cowboys' goals this offseason needed to be to get better running the ball and stopping the run. And for as much as I like them even giving the money to Osa Odighizuwa, he's one of the better interior pass rushers, not a great run defender. We've got Javonte Williams going there, who has had one of the lowest rushing grades in the league over the last 3 years. Robert Jones, he gave backup money. And then even on the side of stopping the run, it's, I think, coming in just now that they've signed Solomon Thomas from the New York Jets. That doesn't do much to help your run defense either, if I'm being honest. So I'm not really sure the direction. It seems like they've opened all this cap space, and yet they're going to be frugal with it anyway. I'm not sure on that front what they're doing, if they're just going to make no impact signings other than Odighizuwa staying. And I just don't know where all this helps them running and stopping the run. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me, some of these moves. So I'm not as big a fan of this, and I think if the original plan was to sign Rico Dowdle and find a complement, I don't think Javonte would be that complement. So now I have to assume Dowdle's probably going somewhere else. And you still need some sort of speed in your backfield to find in the mid rounds of this draft. I'm just not really sure the direction the Cowboys are taking this, right? Again, restructuring Dak Prescott's contract. They have cap space to make maybe one or two impact signings, and it seems like they're just not going to do it.
They're just very comfortable not. They're just very comfortable not doing that. I think for what was it, $3.5 million? I don't know. I like the flyer. It's a 1 year, $3.5 million deal. I still like it because if Javonte does have the ability to return back to form after the injury, this would probably be the year that we would see it from him. If we don't see it from him this year, it's probably not going to happen. Somebody in the chat was saying, hey, he couldn't average more than 4 yards per carry behind Denver's offensive line, and Denver's offensive line was a damn good one last year. That is obviously good context to remember. I still don't hate this for Dallas. I really do. Maybe it's just holding on to hope too long because I love Javonte Williams and what he was at UNC. We got some people who are talking about the Bears in the chat. Dude, I love what the Bears have done this free agency period. bringing in Drew Dahlman, trading for Jonah Jackson, trading for Joe Thuney as well. I mean, there you go. That's a brand new starting five that you feel really confident about up front. And then along the defensive line, Grady Jarrett becomes a free agent from the Atlanta Falcons. They go and get Jarrett. Now, Jarrett's not the player that he once was when he was making Pro Bowls in Atlanta. But I think the veteran presence is really nice, especially for a young defensive interior there in Chicago. And then they brought in Dayo Odeyingbo as well. So some people were saying, hey, that's a pretty big paycheck for Odeyingbo, 3 years, $48 million. But I still I think that the entire strategy here for the Chicago Bears was we are freeing ourselves up to do whatever we want to at number 10. And that's good free agency maneuvering. They got a starting offensive line that they now feel great about, regardless of who they drafted number 10. But it's not just at number 10 either. They got picked 39 and 41 in the second round as well. Those are huge. Now you have the flexibility to do whatever you want there because on your defensive line, you got a veteran on the interior with Grady Jarrett. You have Montez Sweat. You have Odeyingbo. You have Austin Booker behind him, who you're hoping elevates and takes that next step as well. You got a lot of the defense in the secondary figured out. It's just a matter of them playing well. The wide receiver and the passing groups there in Chicago are solid. It's just about some of those guys emerging beyond DJ Moore. You're hoping Rome Odunze obviously takes that next step, and the tight ends continue to play well, play even better in 2025, I should say. The running back room, all right, a little bit unsolved, but now you've got flexibility. Do you want to take Genti at 10? Do you want to take Omarion Hampton at 39? Do you want to take Quinshon Judkins at 39? Travion Henderson at one of those selections? Maybe a Caleb Johnson from Iowa? You have total flexibility to navigate those 3 picks within the top 41 however you want. So I really do love what Chicago has done here over the last 48 hours.
I think the more I think about this, and I was before they made these 2 D-line signings of Odeyingbo and Grady Jarrett, which maybe were mild overpays, but you're getting good veteran guys in there. I thought I was pushing back on the Ginty at 10 bit just because I thought they could still take a pass rusher, and maybe that's still possible. But I think if he's available, I do think Ashton Ginty now would be the favorite to go 10th overall to the Bears because you can find – we've talked about the depth of this defensive line class, and I think that's the biggest thing to me is if you get a superstar back in Ashton Ginty, right, at 10th overall, you can use the rest of the draft to just build depth on your team. If you still want to take, say, a Gray Zabel or an interior offensive lineman with one of those 2 second-round picks, I think it makes a lot of sense to have somebody in there, get in there behind those older guys, right? Especially when you talk about Joe Thuney, still playing at an elite level, but for how much longer, right? You can develop offensive linemen behind them. You can develop that defensive line depth behind those veteran guys you just signed behind Montez Sweat. You can develop a linebacker behind Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards. You could attack the cornerback spot if you feel like you can upgrade on Tyreek Stevenson. You could get another receiver. We got to remember, Keenan Allen's a free agent. It doesn't look like he's coming back. You've got Odunze. You've got DJ Moore. I wouldn't hate a slot receiver, say a Xavier Restrepo in the second round in this offense. I think would be a really good move. Maybe a second tight end with Gerald Everett, a free agent. So I think Ginty now is the favorite to go 10th overall as long as he's there. I would assume the Raiders at 6 are the biggest threat to that. But even then, say Ginty's gone. You still have options, I think, with that top spot. Could take an edge rusher. I think you could take a gamble, maybe a talent play like a Shamar Stewart. You could take a corner, maybe a Jahdae Barron or a Will Johnson at number 10. Fixing this offensive line and at least filling out the defensive line gives them a whole lot of options all over the draft. And I think you've always mentioned it. That's what you want is you want options in the draft. You don't want to feel like you have to take a certain somebody, right? Especially, we've been talking about, are they going to sign Drew Dahlman? If they don't sign a center in free agency, is it going to be Will Campbell? There was about 3 or 4 weeks there where we were shooing in Will Campbell to the Bears every single mock draft, right? That's not going to be the case now. I can tell you right now, they're not going to take an offensive lineman with that 10th overall pick. I think it's going to be D-line, corner, but I think Ashton Ginty right now ahead of those 2 things is the favorite.
I'm going to throw something out at you that the chat cooked up. If he makes it to the Bears at number 10, Tyler Warren. Thoughts?
I can't hate it. I mean, if you're going best player. See, the question would be, is it a choice between Warren and Ginty?
Ooh,
because I still might take Ginty, and I know Tyler Warren would add a whole different dimension. But you already have Cole Kmet there, and I think adding more of a flex tight end, if you get Ginty at 10, and let's say at 39 or 40, let's just say like pick 41 is Elijah Arroyo, right, as a complement to Kmet. I don't hate that at all. I think that's another, but you could take it the other way and go, okay, we have Tyler Warren. and it's a loaded running back class. And if I get Quinshon Judkins with one of those 2 second-round picks, and maybe I take 2 backs. I think there might be a team or two in the league with so many backs in this draft that they take 2 of them and they just go, okay, these are. What if you get, say, Quinshon Judkins in the second and Brashard Smith sometime later? Just something. I'm just thinking of combinations that might go together. That's really going to be a decision. It would be tough if it was Ginty and Warren both on the board. I would probably still lean towards Ginty. I have him slightly ahead of Warren, which again, they're 2 fantastic football players. You really can't go wrong. But no, it would make for an interesting decision because Warren's such a talent. I don't know that Warren would really necessarily get out of the top 9, but I suppose it is still possible.
So Kmet, because I think that this is fascinating. So Kmet has 3 years left on an extension that he signed, but no guaranteed money after that. Or from this point moving on, I should say, over these next 3 years. He is basically an $11.6 million cap hit in every year over the next 3 years. So that's a little bit of flexibility that you could have with the cap. He's 26 years old. When you look at how he is graded from a PFF perspective, I just had this up. Where did it go? Okay, so for a receiving grade, the only season in which he has received a receiving grade above 66.1 is in 2023. So not this past year, but the year before, it was a 77.7. This past year, it was just a 58.6. So it was it was a tick down. You understand, Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, those guys are going to get the bulk of that. So it will be very interesting to see how much he's emphasized in Ben Johnson's offense, because I think there is a world where they could prioritize Tyler Warren, giving them flexibility over Cole Kmet and being able to move on from him at any time, gaining an extra $10 million on cap space at least, and then drafting one of those running backs at the top of the second round that you like.
I think with the big thing with Warren there too is he's generally considered one of, if not the best blockers at the position in this draft, and you can clearly tell Ben Johnson's emphasizing running the football, right? He does not want Caleb Williams going out there throwing the ball 45 times right now. Is he obviously more versatile than Jared Goff when it comes to bootlegs and mobility and things like that? Sure, but he's not going to ask. As little as possible, I would say he's not going to ask Caleb Williams to just drop back and throw the football, right? He wants to run the ball. He wants to get into play action. He wants to put the layers in the system. And Warren adds so many more layers when it comes to the fact that he can inline block so well and get out and run routes and make plays after the catch. So it's certainly a possibility, again, especially with – I think this is going to be a decision that teams make with regards to Ashton Ginty, where it's, look, the depth of this running back class is great also. Clearly, he's the best one in a very talented group, but we do have options later, and if we have other guys that make our offense even better at other spots, I can find running backs, especially with the Bears having 2 second-round picks. You can go running back and defensive lineman at 39 and 41, and you'd feel really good about it if you're Chicago.
Couple of things I want to hit on. Somebody in the chat was talking about Seattle. I want to hit on them. Somebody earlier was asking about Javon Holland, so I want to get to them next, and then we're going to talk about the Carolina Panthers as well really quickly. There is another person who was asking, hey, who are some of the top blocking tight ends outside of Tyler Warren? I think Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame is a big-bodied tight end that you can get later in the draft. They can do some blocking and some receiving for you. Jackson Hawes is the one that a lot of people talk about from Georgia Tech. Like, that's why he's on the field. He's on the field to block, and he's got that mentality about him. I think Caden Prescorn as well, decent receiver, but he is somebody who could play in line. At least he's got the size for it. I like oh my goodness, Benjamin Jurasik from Georgia. He's a little bit different. He's a little bit more of like a Ben Sennett type of a player. He's not this just, like hog molly type of a tight end, but I think that he gives you some plus as a blocker as well. So those are just some names that I wanted to shout out there. Somebody in the chat was saying, hey, can I get something to be optimistic about with the Seahawks? Because it's tough times. If you're a lifelong Seahawks fan right now, you just watched Geno Smith get traded. You watched DK Metcalf get traded. They moved on from Tyler Lockett. I mean, it's a lot of wholesale changes that we have. The Pete Carroll era is now officially over as they are turning the page in a lot of major ways. Things to be optimistic about here with the Seattle Seahawks. I think, Dalton, your point, and a good starter, is, hey, amongst all those changes, you do get Sam Darnold, who's coming off a really good deal. You get him for a pretty decent deal. You really do. You're saving money on what you would have had for Geno Smith, even though I wouldn't have done it. You can feel good about that. And the connection between him and Clint Kubiak. I think that you did a great job of outlining that yesterday as a reason to be optimistic as a Seahawks fan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's the fact that he fits with Kubiak. He knows Kubiak from his time in San Francisco, why he's going to fit, at least in the system, right? I don't know for me that it's as much a concern about Darnold, especially with his comfortability in that system. I think it's more about, look, we just have to fix this interior offensive line. Obviously, now we need help outside at receiver. I think those are going to be areas of focus in this draft. But we have to remember, too, looking at it now, and I'm not sure the Darnold contract, if it's gone completely through yet, but I'm not seeing it as gone through. So let's say it's $33 million. They've got a decent amount of cap space still to work with, roughly $26 million in effective cap space. I think maybe they're waiting for the top of the guard market to cool down a little bit. I think there's some room, maybe if they can afford a guy like Tevin Jenkins to start at that right guard spot would be a really good move. Those are the two areas. I don't think the Seahawks are as far off as people think they are all of a sudden. I know they've cut Tyler Lockett, who's a legacy guy in Seattle. Obviously, they traded Metcalf, but they did get the 52nd overall pick for Metcalf, right? And I think, obviously, when you talk about a mid-second round pick, that's still a premier pick where you can get a starting caliber player, right? Say a guard. Let's just say, I don't know, if Donovan Jackson was sitting there from Ohio State and you got him 52nd overall, I would have no issue with that at all. He slots in. He can obviously play multiple spots, but I think you look at this draft and you look at the ability to get receiver, interior offensive line. Trevor, I'm looking at their picks right now. 18, 50, 52, 82, 92. You got ample opportunity to get starters at positions of need. There's receiver depth. Day 2 is the sweet spot for interior offensive line. If maybe at 82 or 92 is somebody like a center like Jared Wilson from Georgia, I think that makes your offensive line better. There is a lot to work with here with 10 draft picks with a decent amount of cap space. The offseason's not over. They are not going to walk into next year with the team that they have right now with just Sam Darnold and Swiss cheese in the interior and just Jackson Smith-Njigba is the only guy catching the ball. They're going to attack receiver in this draft, and they're certainly going to attack interior offensive line still between free agency and the draft.
Speaking of quarterbacks, Daniel Jones going to the Colts.
I called it, baby. I called it yesterday.
Well done.
Called it at the end of the show. Daniel Jones going to the Colts. I actually like this move a lot.
Oh, he might.
I know Colts.
I'll say it for as much as
Don't say it. Don't do it. Come
listen,
on. We're having a good time.
I know Gator greats and all that, but would it be that shocking to see him starting week 1?
Yes.
I don't think it'd be that shocking. You have to complete passes. And if nothing else, at least we know in the shorter areas of the field, 15 and under, he can complete passes. And this is an offense that completes passes, moves the chain. If Gardner Minshew can go 9-8 with this football team, which he did 2 years ago, Daniel Jones could absolutely do it.
Your knockback Nats, shout out, wings and beer order will be on me if Daniel Jones starts week 1 for the Indianapolis Colts. I don't even need to have a other side of the bet with you. I'm just that confident in it. I will just tell you that your wings and beer is on me if Daniel Jones starts week 1 for the Indianapolis Colts. Because it's not happening.
I would not be that shocked. I'm telling you right now.
Now, week 7 or 8? Unfortunately, could be the case. But not week 1. It's never happened in week 1. They're not letting that happen. No. Chris Ballard can't let that happen. Shane Steichen can't let that happen. God himself can't let that happen.
1 year, $14 million per Schefter.
Ooh, $14 million. That sounds like week 1 money.
That was my thoughts as well. You get a lot of wings at Knockback Nats for $14 million.
That's almost $1 million to start. That'll do.
That's week 1 money. I don't know about that. I'm still not believing in it. But it does make a good segue into what the Colts have done, because I want to talk about secondary, and then I'm going to get to the New York Giants after that. I see Broncos fans really want us to talk about the Broncos. They're one of my favorite hauls, at least for the couple of guys that they hit there. We will talk about the Broncos. We'll get to it, guys. There's 32 teams around the league. But the Colts, Cam Bynum, Charvarius Ward. I mean, secondary was a big issue that they had here. So they're making those big splashes by bringing those couple of guys in, even beyond just the Daniel Jones signing. What do you think about the Colts? You're going after a guy like Charvarius Ward and their fit in a Lou Anarumo defense now that he is a defense coordinator there. I really like it a lot given how big of a weakness this was for Indianapolis last year.
So I love the Ward signing, and I know he had some personal stuff this past year he was going through, and he had a career-low coverage grade, but this is somebody who is just 1 year removed from an 86.5 coverage grade, and the biggest thing is that he's one of the best zone coverage corners in the NFL, and obviously Lou Anarumo is known for all his complicated zone defenses that confuse quarterbacks post-snaps, right? So I think Charvarius Ward, still at just 29 years old, he's going to be this season. I think that's a great signing. I'm a little more confused by the Cam Bynum signing, and let's just talk about the safety market on the whole for 1 second. Cam Bynum being the highest paid guy per year out of this safety market kind of comes as a shock to me, especially when you consider, you and I talked about yesterday, when we were talking about Javon Holland and the teams that he could possibly go to. The Colts were on that list as a team with interest. We both picked the Colts as Holland's best landing spot. He ends up with the Giants this morning that we'll get into for $15 a year, 3 and 45. Bynum gets 3 and 60. Did we miss something here where I thought Javon Holland was clearly, I know he's coming off a down year. It was a down year for the entire Dolphins defense, but I thought Holland was clearly the best safety on the market, and yet he's been paid like just one of the guys, and the Colts choosing Bynum at $20 million a year when he had a 61.6 grade this past year, coverage grade under 70 in all 3 seasons as a starter in Minnesota. That's the one I'm a little lost on. I really like the Ward signing. I think they've had a needed outside corner for a guy like that for a while, but the Bynum one confuses me a little bit more. I get it. Starting caliber, box safety, a little bit better in run defense than in coverage, but if it's me personally, if I was going to spend that money, even at $20 million, I might have gone and got Holland.
So then, it does shock me that Holland's market wasn't a little bit more robust because I do think that he's the better player. Holland signs with the Giants, and they also got Paulson Adebo there. What do you think about what they've done there in the secondary? Because that was also a major need for the New York Giants, whether it was at the safety position or certainly the cornerback position as well. Deonte Banks really struggled last year. Drew Phillips looked great in what they wanted him to do in the slot, but I think that he's got the flexibility to be able to play on the outside as well. I think he proved that at the Senior Bowl when he was getting some outside reps there. So they go out and they get a safety who, in my opinion, was the best safety to bet on in Javon Holland. He's had 2 down years, but he's had 2 great years as well, near elite coverage years. And look, I don't think we talk about the safety position enough as just having these ups and downs, man. I mean, it's just the nature of the position. You're playing so far away from the ball. So much of it is about judging space and timing and fitting with the chemistry of what the rest of the defense is. And you're just going to have years that are up and down. That's also sort of my defense for Malachi Starks as well this year. There's a lot of people who are down on Malachi Starks because he wasn't as impactful this past season, but we have to give safeties, in my opinion, a little bit more grace than it seems like we do right now, just for having a little bit higher of a wavelength when it comes to peaks and valleys of how they're going to be throughout their careers, because it's a tough position to play. So I really like on the opposite side of what the Giants did to bring in Javon Holland and then sign a guy like Paulson Adebo, who I think is a good cornerback when he is fully healthy. Now you don't have to rely on Deonte Banks to be your CB1. Now he could be more of your CB2, maybe even CB3, depending on what you want to do with Drew Phillips. I like Tyler Newman as well. Now with Javon Holland being able to play more of those single higher, just true coverage roles, you free him up to be exactly what he was at Minnesota, which is that rover, middle of the field, robber type of a strong safety prospect. So to me, the moves that the Giants have made in their secondary feel like really good scheme fits in what they were missing and why their secondary struggled last season. So on the flip side of sort of going along with the Colts, and I agree, I like the Charvarius Ward move a lot. I do like the Bynum move more than you do, but for where Holland it actually went with the Giants, I like what the Giants did as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you have a Giants team who, with a fun fact that's been getting thrown around this morning with the Giants is that their entire secondary, those 5 guys you mentioned, Adebo, Banks, Holland, Phillips, and Newman, they will all be 26 years old or younger come opening day in September. So I think that's a very, very big thing. You have not only a talented secondary, but a youthful secondary that could stick together for multiple years. I think Phillips is going to stay on the slot. He was really good as that nickel this year. And I think Banks, he's going to get one more shot to prove himself on the outside, right, with a little more help in that secondary. And I think that's one of the things. Two things with Holland that jump out to me. One, yes, he's coming off a career-low coverage grade, okay? You know who else came off a career-low coverage grade going into free agency? Jesse Bates. And I think he could have the same impact somewhere. That's how good. That's the ceiling that we've seen of Holland, is that he's been as good as a guy like Jesse Bates. He's been one of the elite safeties in football. And the other thing is, to me, the Giants the last couple of years have tried to lean into playing a lot of man-to-man coverage. And I just don't think they've had the tools to do that, right? But now you talk about adding a Debo who played a ton of man coverage with the Saints under Dennis Allen, long, rangy, 6'1", 190-pound corner. Banks is obviously experienced in the system. And having a guy like Holland, this is what you mentioned about safety impact on the back end. When you have a center fielder like that, it makes everybody else's life a little bit easier. They feel like they can
100%.
take some chances. They have some help, right? I talked last year, for as much as I talked about Xavier McKinney was my favorite free agent signing to the Packers last year, because you had Jeff Hafley coming in, they're getting single high, it's McKinney's wheelhouse. Well, the Giants lost that guy. The Giants were that the year before, where they were man-to-man and they had McKinney back there and he could pick off passes down the field. Now you might get that again when you're talking about Javon Holland. He can have that same impact. You mentioned Tyler Nubin can float around the box. He can play a little robber. He played a lot of quarters at Minnesota. He knows how to do that. But I think Holland being back there as that center field, as the backbone behind all these guys, right, behind Banks, and Banks can feel comfortable about what's behind him instead of, last year they kind of had two box safeties back there, and Jason Pinnock and Nubin as a rookie.
That's how it felt.
Yeah,
that's how it felt.
Now you feel better about, okay, we can line up man-to-man, we can send this pass rush, and all we got to do is win our matchups one-on-one, and Holland will be back there as the ball hawk. I think it's a great, great move, especially for the value that they got for Holland and the value that some of these other safeties were coming off the board at. I did not think we would see guys like Cam Bynum or, Talanoa Hufanga got the same amount of money as Holland, or I think there was somebody else. Trayvon Merrick got 17 a year when Holland got 15. Never would have thought that. I know, again, he's off a down year. I think that Dolphins team in the secondary last year, at the second half of the year, just didn't look like the effort level was there as a unit. There's just something not right going on down there in Miami right now. But I think to get Holland at that price as a fit in the defense, the way that they want to run it in this Giants defense, you start to like, if they're healthy, especially if Dexter Lawrence gets back healthy, you start to like the direction the Giants defense is headed in.
All right, before we dig into the next couple of teams, people are just shouting at us about what our thoughts are for the Carolina Panthers. So I do want to get to the Panthers next, and then we'll hit on the Denver Broncos before we get to some other, questions in the chat. If you guys have questions on or just opinions, fire them off. I'm looking at the chat the whole show, so we can go back and forth with you guys a bunch. Before we get to that, a question for everybody out there watching the show. As a parent, what does success for your kids look like for you? Maybe it's them traveling the world, having a lot of flexibility with a job, having a house that they own, just a very comfortable lifestyle. Whatever that is, you can help them achieve that dream, both big and small, with Fabric by Gerber Life. Fabric by Gerber Life, it was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With the Kids Investment Account for Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Your kids cannot invest while they are minors, but a Kids Investment Account from Fabric allows you to invest on their behalf, giving their investments more time to grow. Whole thing is online, very easy to set up an account. Could take you as little as just 5 minutes, and then you just manage your child's account and monitor those investments right from your phone. Those funds can be used for nearly anything. Tuition, music classes, tutors, sporting events, whatever. And then when they're adults, maybe it's helping them buy their first car, their first house, maybe starting a business, whatever it is. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family and start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL, MEET, fabric.com/PFFNFL to check out that Kids Investment Account. Portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Learn more at meetfabric.com. Just another shout out. If you guys want to see all this information that we're talking about here on the show, go over to pff.com. You can check out the PFF free agency tracker. You can sort it by position to talk about like, hey, my team still needs a safety. They've, had a swing and a miss in some of the bigger guys, but who else is still out there? You could check it for all those different positions on guys who have been signed, guys who haven't yet. Or if you're just looking at, hey, I wonder what my team has done. I can't remember all the free agency moves. You can check it out, and you can sort that by team as well. I do want to talk about the Carolina Panthers as the next team. We've had a lot of people in the chat. Shout out to Carolina Panthers. They signed Trayvon Merrick, who you were talking about before we went to commercial there. So they got Trayvon Merrick now. I think that really helps out their secondary. That's a boosted talent there from what they had last season. They also signed Bobby Brown III from the Los Angeles Rams, Tershawn Wharton from the Kansas City Chiefs. To me, those are big, beefy dudes who can defend the run in the middle and really free up Derek Brown to be that unique, quick player who can get into the backfield and get tackles for loss and sacks. So I love that. They re-signed J.C. Horn. They got some edge rush help with Patrick Jones II, who, in my opinion, is a pretty underrated edge rusher in this league. Is he a star? No, but I think he's somebody that's really going to help out that pass rush rotation. So they invested a lot in that interior defensive line. They also, like I said, brought back J.C. Horn. They brought back Mike Jackson, brought back Tommy Tremble and Austin Corbett. What did you think of the Carolina Panthers, Dalton?
I think it's a pretty good response to the fact that they missed out, especially on Milton Williams, and by all indications, it seems like they had that almost locked up, and then New England came in and just gave Williams an offer that he couldn't refuse, right? So I do think they wanted one more star, but if you're going to look at what they did and just the amount of depth that they had, right? It's almost kind of the Washington Commanders approach of, okay, let's go get quantity. Let's go get at least viable starters, right? You talk about Tershawn Wharton. Is he a world beater? No, but he's a good enough player to be a starter for you. Bobby Brown, same thing, good run stopper. Trayvon Merrick is a legitimate starting safety, although, again, I wonder, 17 a year for Merrick, 15 a year that Holland got from the Giants. What was the disconnect here, right? And again, maybe, I don't know, maybe we need to look into something. Maybe there's something behind the scenes with Holland we don't know about.
I like Merrick. I do.
Yeah, no,
I like Merrick, but it is intriguing that he was signed for the same amount that John Holland was.
No, I agree. Actually more so than Holland was per year. So I do think this is the part of the Panthers defense where the Commanders did this last year. Go in, find enough viable starters. Just find enough of them and figure out, okay, at least we can raise the floor, and maybe we're not the worst defense in football this year, right? The Commanders did the same thing. Did they get a couple of stars? Obviously, Bobby Wagner had the connection with Dan Quinn. Eventually, they traded for Marshawn Lattimore. I just think when you're talking about Carolina trying to fill in the holes, they're trying to fill as many holes as possible, right? And they can try to find that star level talent with the 8th overall pick in the draft. So I do think when you talk about Carolina just trying to fill as many spots as possible, they're doing a pretty good job of it. I think they would have much rather had Milton Williams, and they felt they had that locked up. But otherwise, it's a good job of just trying to get as many starters as they can.
So I think that Carolina is doing with it. Obviously, like, having Milton Williams yesterday, in theory, and then not having Milton Williams is sort of tough because you would have loved to see Milton Williams next to Derek Brown. But I think they are going about things the right way. I think they are looking at this team building the way that they need to. They're allocating the salary cap the way they need to. They took a swing on Milton Williams, and obviously it just didn't happen. He ends up going to the Patriots. So that, to me, is still, it's hard to stomach that, but you've done enough around them to where you can feel good about what you have going into next season. I'm curious as to what they now do at number 8 overall, how they navigate that, knowing that the defensive line is, I don't want to say fixed, but I think it gives them the flexibility to, if they wanted to take a Tyler Warren, if they wanted to take a Tetsuo McMillan, now it frees you up to be able to do that. I did want to talk about the Denver Broncos as well. They've been sort of quiet, made 2 moves, but I love these moves from them. Getting Talanoa Hufanga for 3 years, $45 million, and then getting Dre Greenlaw as well. They re-signed DJ Jones too. In my opinion, this is making sure one of the best defenses in the league last year stays that going into 2025. What did you think about these moves and what the Denver Broncos are kind of cooking there on the defensive side?
So I'll start with Greenlaw because I was figuring they were going to make an impact signing when it came to linebacker. Their defensive line was top 10 this past year. Their secondary was top 10 this past year, but their linebackers were the one unit that really struggled. They had Cody Barton and Justin Chernad playing there for the most part. The interesting thing with Greenlaw is clearly he's a guy that they were targeting, that they wanted, and giving him a substantial 3-year contract when a lot of people maybe thought he was going to get a 1-year deal coming off a year where he played, I think, less than 40 snaps off the torn Achilles in the previous Super Bowl. I think the fact that they get to replace Cody Barton, especially, who signed in Tennessee, with a talent like Greenlaw, it could be a big deal. It could really change this Broncos defense. I think that's the one spot. I still expect them either maybe Drew Sanders, a draft pick from a couple years ago, starts alongside him. They still have Stranad, or they find somebody on day 2 of the draft who can start alongside Greenlaw at linebacker. But if that hits and he's 100% healthy and he produces the way he used to before the Achilles injury, this is a home run, and it makes the Broncos one of the best defenses in football, a true 3-layer defense. Moving over to Hufanga, kind of the same thing. Before he tore his ACL down the stretch in 2023, he was operating like one of the best box safeties in football, right? And I think he's the perfect complement to a free safety like Brandon Jones, who was terrific for them this past year. Now Hufanga, we've talked over and over about Sean Payton wanting jokers on his team, right? And I know he's talked about the offense, but Hufanga is kind of that at that strong safety position, gives you that almost Troy Polamalu freewheeling kind of deal there. I think it's a great complement to Jones in their secondary at safety. I think Greenlaw is a spectacular talent play and someone they clearly wanted with that size of a contract, even so recently having torn his Achilles. But if those two moves pan out, you really look at the Denver Broncos, I think, as a top 5 defense in the league.
It's hard not to, right? Given the success that they had last year, and you're just adding 2 players who, I guess the theme of today is just playing with your hair on fire, because a lot of guys are getting moved, and we're talking about a lot of players who have the ability to do that. You already had a pretty good secondary that you felt good about, and now you get Hufanga, who it'll be interesting to see sort of how he plays. He played that box safety, second level defender, just middle of the field defender type of a role. Does he play a little bit more of the free safety spot with Brandon Jones there, PJ Locke there as well? So those guys are a little bit more enforcers. So I'm curious as to how he's going to be deployed there, but getting more speed at the linebacker level. If they had any real quote-unquote needs from last year's defense, it felt like that was going to be it, and you certainly get that in theory with Greenlaw when he is fully healthy. So I like what they're doing there. They're sort of pigeonholing themselves when it comes to what they're going to do in the NFL draft, when it comes to just like, hey, this is now an offense-focused draft strategy here. But that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world for them to be able to do that. Somebody in the chat, Brian, saying, hey, they're also likely to sign Evan Ingram, which I talked about yesterday as a really great idea. If the Broncos come out of this free agency with Evan Ingram, with Dre Greenlaw, and Talanoa Hufanga, I really do love what they've done here. And especially when you pair it with what I think is going to be a pretty good draft haul from them, given their needs. I actually do like that a lot. So those 3 guys, if they can make those 3 additions and make those final, because obviously, you sign the deals tomorrow. That's when the new league year actually opens. It's just kind of agreements for the tampering period right now. I think that would be key for them to be able to get those 3 guys. Man, what team do we want to hit on next? Which team has made some moves?
Jacksonville. There's Jacksonville. We could talk Rams. I mean, we could go plenty. We got plenty of directions to go for sure.
Let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars then. I wondered if there was anybody, if your heart was heavy, needing to talk about somebody one way or the other, and the first team that you said was the Jacksonville Jaguars. So once again, guys, you can check all this out over at the free agency tracker over at PFF.com. As I'm pulling it up here for Jacksonville, signed Jordan Lewis. We talked about that. We like the signing, like the player. A little bit interesting now what you do with Jerry Jones, because he played in the slot last year, and Jordan Lewis plays a lot in the slot. But they signed Patrick McCarry as well. Robert Hainsey, they're losing Mitch Morris. They don't have Brandon Sheriff because he was a free agent. They signed Diami Brown to be another vertical threat, which I think we could probably start the conversation there and then talk about the rest of the signings that they have had. To me, getting Diami Brown is more evidence to them truly just wanting to use Brian Thomas Jr. everywhere. Because now they have Gabe Davis, they have Diami Brown, they have those 2 guys who could play on the outside. You have Parker Washington, who could also play in the slot for you. So on any given down, in any given situation, Brian Thomas Jr. could be the X, he could be the Z, or he could be the slot receiver for you. That's what you truly want when it comes to setting up that versatility. And so that's sort of what I feel when I look at the Jacksonville Jaguars and sort of the what they have done in the free agent period. But you wanted to bring them up, so let's hear it. What do you want to say about the Jacksonville Jaguars?
I think it's the 2 offensive line moves that intrigue me the most when you talk about getting Patrick McCarry from the Ravens, who's a very versatile player. He's played all 5 positions in his career, played mostly left guard this past season, did not give up a sack at left guard. And on the surface, it might look like, okay, it's kind of an average pass protector. He had a 71.6 pass blocking grade this year, but it's really dragged down by just one tough game against Milton Williams and Jalen Carter and the Eagles. You take out that one game, that goes all the way up to 7 79.1. And I think at that point, if you're going to get that level of consistent production out of Macari, somewhere on your interior offensive line, at whichever guard spot, I think you're going to get an upgrade in pass protection. And that's big time for them. I think the biggest problem that you've seen the last year and a half from the Jaguars is just an inability to protect Trevor Lawrence, right? If you're going to have an asset like that at quarterback, the same way we talked about C.J. Stroud in Houston, it's been the same problem in Jacksonville. You have to protect him, and you have to be able, obviously, to run the ball too. And I'm curious your thoughts on them getting Robert Hainsey likely to play. I assume he's going to be their starting center with him getting a 3-year, $21 million contract. Not a terrible player for the Bucs. I know they replaced him this last year with Graham Barton. He made one decent start against New Orleans, but I think getting Macari and Hainsey at least a little bit raises the floor on this offensive line. I think, I believe it's Ezra Cleveland still at one guard spot, so maybe Macari kicks over to the right side. But do we feel like with Walker Little, Patrick Macari, Cleveland, Hainsey, and Anton Harrison, do we feel like that's the set starting five for Jacksonville? Or are they going to continue to look at offensive line in this draft and maybe continue to upgrade on what they already have?
No, I don't think that it takes offensive line off the table. I think that it's solid enough for them, right? We sound like a broken record, but this is what it is. Free agency allows you to navigate the draft how you want, especially when you have a top 5 pick. You don't want to sit there and go, well, we have to pick offensive line. So Travis Hunter's available for us at number 5, but I guess we're going with Armand Membou because we absolutely have to. You never want to put yourself in that situation. So I think that Hainsey is solid. I thought he was an experienced guy when he was coming out of Notre Dame. I thought he had a decent floor when it came to his projection to the NFL. He's able to start for them, but the Bucs found an upgrade, and I think Jacksonville is going to look at him and say, like, hey, we're hoping to get a solid player. Is he going to be the best guy on our offensive line? No, probably not, but you throw in Patrick Macari next to him as well. I like Ezra Cleveland, and then you're hoping the offensive tackles of Walker Little and Anton Harrison can take that next step. And, hey, maybe it comes out to where Armand Membou is their best option there at number 5, and they end up taking him, but I wouldn't say it takes it off the table, but it does give them a lot of flexibility of how they want to navigate number 5, including a trade down scenario, which could be the case for Jacksonville. So that's sort of my thoughts on them. I think there are a couple of teams that people are wondering, like, hey, what are they doing? Because they're not doing a lot. The Atlanta Falcons are one of them. They've signed one player so far, Divine Diablo, who I actually like that signing there for them. I like getting some extra speed there at the linebacker level. So the Falcons are one of those teams. I know Chargers fans are like, man, what are the Chargers doing? They brought back Khalil Mack, which was a big move for them. They signed Dante Jackson. They released Joey Bosa. They extended Elijah Molden. They signed Najee Harris. I think that was sort of their big splash guy that they were bringing in, even though it's only a 1-year, $9 million deal. You talk about how the team could be a little bit different. You're hoping that that's going to be the case. So those are a couple teams that have been a little bit more quiet. Anybody else stand out? I'm trying to scroll here and see who's been a little bit more quiet in that regard as well.
I mean, you're talking about the Chargers. It's a little odd because they have more cap space than most other teams. I think it makes sense that the Falcons are quiet with so little cap space. I think you think about teams. Tell you what, outside of Ronnie Stanley, we've seen nothing from the Baltimore Ravens either. I know they don't have the best cap situation either right now when it comes to free agency, and they're likely to build through the draft, but we've seen nothing else from the Baltimore Ravens, and maybe that was their only goal, is to just sign Ronnie Stanley. I think you've got, let's see here, the Cleveland Browns, obviously, with their cap situation, haven't done a whole lot aside from extending Myles Garrett and getting the Kenny Pickett trade done. The Cowboys, to me, and I know they're making a handful of minor moves and they re-signed Odigizua, but I think they have some room now with the way that they've restructured some things. I'm just curious why they're not a little more in, at least on fixing up their front seven, where I think there's been arguably the most free agency value so far. When you're talking about guys, there was guys like, say, Apuna Ford was available and he ended up with the Rams instead of a Dallas. That's one to me. I go, okay, you cleared this space, but for what exactly, right? That's kind of the issue I'm having with Dallas, because they did restructures. Right now they have the 2-4, I think right around the 9th or 10th most effective cap space in the league, almost $50 million, and it's just sitting there. So that's really one that would confuse me, as I go, the Chargers a little bit and the Cowboys, but the Chargers got Mack, they re-signed Taylor Tart, they got Najee Harris. They're making kind of moves that they don't want to get too drastic on, but the Dallas Cowboys, to me, that's a thing. Because let's be real, and I know they have to extend Micah Parsons at some point, but with Dak Prescott and the way his contract is, they're stuck in kind of this win now mode that maybe they don't even want to be in at this point. But I would just think they would have made a few more moves that would impact their front seven especially.
Somebody shouted this out in the chat, and I agree. Green Bay as well. Green Bay pays Aaron Banks a lot of money. I don't think they needed to do that. I mean, I don't know how much higher the return on investment is for them bringing in Aaron Banks. Now, maybe you think that he is a better player than Sean Ryan at one of those guard spots, and I could believe that because I do like Aaron Banks, but how much of an upgrade is he over that? I don't know if that was the best allocated resources for that cap space that you had there, even though he's a fine player. Signed Nate Hobbs as well, that 4-year, $48 million contract, but I believe that contract is pretty low in overall guarantees, so it's a lot of prove-it stuff with Nate Hobbs, who seemed pretty fired up, honestly, to be a member of the Green Bay Packers. So I think you like the fit in that regard, but if you're bringing in Nate Hobbs, is it like a one-in, one-out thing with Jair Alexander? So it's just like, okay, well, sure, they're fixing the secondary a little bit, but then you're moving on from Jair because it sounds like they're trying to move on from him and find a trade partner for him. Not sure that that's going to happen given his contract and how many games he has missed over the last couple of seasons. So I also just don't feel like Green Bay has done a ton. I don't really think too differently of them when it comes to the moves that they have made in free agency either. So I think it's much of the same for Green Bay until we get to the draft.
So the Green Bay offensive line situation is one that's kind of fascinated me for the better part of a year now, because I think signing Banks, and it's a huge contract. I'm not sure I would have given him that level of a deal, but they have some issues on the interior with their center position already struggling, and then their starter Josh Myers being a free agent, right? And maybe the theory is Banks slots in at left guard where he did for San Francisco. Elgton Jenkins maybe moves inside to center. I know there's been other talk about Zach Tom moving inside to center, or maybe they try to find a center in the draft. I think Gray Zabel would have been a logical target before this signing, but does this mean Jenkins moves into center? Are you certainly going to get Banks at one guard spot? And then what do you do with last year's first-round pick Jordan Morgan? Because he had all the injuries last year, especially with his shoulder. It was an issue, and then he missed most of the latter stretch of the season. Sean Ryan was starting in his place. He was okay, wasn't spectacular. You would hope at some point Morgan could replace him, but it feels like you have this logjam on the Packers, especially with the interior of their offensive line. There was, before they signed Banks, there was almost a theory that, okay, could we move Zach Tom into center and find a new right tackle and figure it out that way, because Tom is versatile and he's obviously a fantastic player, but he's also one of the best right tackles in the league, and it's hard to find those. So you do, to me, the Packers' interior offensive line, even with this signing, is going to continue to be a story. And look, Banks is a system fit. Matt LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan, same type of guy. You're trying to get in the outside zone game, even though they got a little more downhill with Josh Jacobs this year. I just question if this really improves the interior of their pass protection, right? Because I think that was an issue in San Francisco, and Banks contributed a little bit to that, right? You know, if I'm pulling up his pass blocking grades right now, but he's never exactly been a plus pass blocker, right? And I figured he would stay, Green Bay makes sense. Miami would have made sense as a fit with the system fit. Anybody in that Shanahan system, but you're talking about a guy in 3 years as a starter, his pass blocking grades, 61, 50, 60. It doesn't make them better in pass protection, and it feels like you just now have a more expensive version of the same problem in Green Bay, where the interior pass protection is an issue. And now you're moving Jenkins into center, where he's played before but not in a while, and you have Banks, who's a very mediocre pass protector, and then you're doing something with either or both of, because they were rotating both at times, Sean Ryan and Jordan Morgan at right guard, and Morgan doesn't have a ton of reps and he's got injuries. I don't think this makes me feel any better about the Packers' interior, their offensive line.
No, and again, I don't necessarily hate it. I think you did a good job of sort of laying it out there. I don't think they're going to move Zach Tom. I think it's much more likely that they move Elgton Jenkins into center because he's got that versatility there. You're hoping that Jordan Morgan can play better than Sean Ryan, and he could play at one of those guard spots. And then, you got Rasheed Walker. Or maybe you think that Jordan Morgan's going to play outside and eventually take over for Rasheed Walker. Maybe that could be the case. I'm not necessarily saying that it's like a bad fit, a bad signing. I do agree with you. Aaron Banks going over to Matt LaFleur's system in Green Bay, I think it's exactly what they want to run. I think it's very similar to Shanahan because he's part of the Shanahan tree and his offense and his philosophy there, especially with running the ball with that mid and outside zone thought process. So I think that Banks is a good fit. I just don't know how this really makes Green Bay that much better. Maybe it does. Maybe they thought that they were barely piecing it together last season, but I think it's kind of a marginal upgrade there. We'll see with Nate Hobbs as well, but I think the Packers have to do a lot more moves here. Let's talk about the Buffalo Bills. We have not talked about the Buffalo Bills, and they are a team that has made a couple of deals here that I actually really like for Buffalo. I'm getting to their section of the PFF tracker here. They extended Gregory Rousseau, which I like. They extended Terrell Bernard, which I like. They extended Khalil Shakir, and of course, there's the Josh Allen extension as well. So they're getting ahead of and rewarding their own guys. They did that ahead of the tampering period opening, so they knew exactly where they could stand there. I love the Michael Hoyt addition because they are very versatile along their defensive line. They like to have a lot of different defensive linemen, whether it's, Greg Rousseau or AJ Epinesa or, plenty of other players who have played on that defensive line over the last couple of years who can give you a little bit of inside-out versatility. To me, Michael Hoyt is one of those players. They signed him a 3-year, up to $24 million deal. He brings you that versatility. That theme along the defensive line is the same there. And then Josh Palmer. I like him as a field stretcher for them. It's just another receiving option for them to have and sort of figure out and maximize what they want to do on those deep passing downs and those third and long, second and long situations. So Palmer was somebody who I like the addition. They're losing Matt Collins, who is now wide receiver 1 in New England.
Yeah, he's in New England. Which might be the top guy.
We can get to the Patriots a little bit later for that. Love what they've done on the defensive side of things, but man, it's going to be an offensive heavy draft for the Patriots. But you're losing Matt Collins, but you're bringing in Josh Palmer. To me, I really do think it was a healthy approach, very similar to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and what they've done this offseason and how we've liked a lot of what they've done. Take care of your own. Make sure the good players on the roster are good. They're set. Your cap salary is very healthy. And now you can go out and get the key players that are going to help your team out to continue that winning window and maybe get you over the hump into the Super Bowl. So I do like what the Buffalo Bills have done this offseason.
Yeah, the two external moves, I'll start with Hoyt, who I think is actually a really good value signing. We got to remember the Bills were really working on a budget here, didn't have the most cap space. They're riding kind of right along the line of the cap right now even. And Hoyt's a guy who had a higher run defense grade than any of the Bills' edge defenders did this past season. So I think that's a big thing for at least for him to get in on early downs, and then they can flip it over and get Epinesa in on passing downs, or maybe if there's any edge players they feel like drafting. And then Palmer gives you the same, if not more, production as Mac Hollins at 6 years younger in age, right? He's only, I believe, going to be 26 years old this year. So anytime you can get similar production at a significantly younger age makes a lot of sense, right? And you look at their receiving core, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Josh Palmer, the two tight ends, obviously James Cook, Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, if they re-sign him in the backfield. I know Johnson's a free agent, but you still maintain this idea of having so much depth that Josh Allen always got to do is read the defense and beat Josh Allen, right? It makes a ton of sense. I think still the emphasis is going to be on the defense in this draft. It's great to re-sign, to extend Rousseau, especially signing Hoyt, I think is very good for their early down run defense. You still look at D-tackle, linebacker, and maybe even safety, and corner. I mean, this is the thing. They had the second lowest coverage grade in the NFL this past year, so they have to fix that entire part of it. I think that's going to be a heavy focus in the draft along with defensive tackle. So it's a good start. It's a couple of good moves and extensions for the value that they got it at and where they were with their salary cap situation, but there's still multiple steps to go before this defense, I think, is on a Super Bowl contending level.
I think you've talked about the Rams enough here throughout this show, kind of just being like, hey, what about the Rams? Hey, what about the Rams? Hey, what about the Rams? Let's talk about the Rams now. They signed Davante Adams. They signed Poona Ford. So they lose out on Bobby Brown and they lose out on Michael Hoyt, but they bring in Poona Ford, somebody who is a really stout run defender, even gave you some extra juice in pass rush this past season, which I absolutely love. They traded Jonah Jackson, so he's out, but they were able to bring back Matthew Stafford, which was huge for them. They re-signed Alaric Jackson, they re-signed Tutu Atwell, and they're bringing back Jimmy G as well. You are a fan of some of the moves that the Los Angeles Rams have made, so I'll let you have the floor and talk about what you like about the Rams.
Huge fan. I think you start at the beginning of this process. You think about getting out of the Jonah Jackson contract. I know we've talked about that as a good move, at least to me, for the Bears with his fit with Ben Johnson, but it's also good to get Jackson's salary off the books, and I believe it was a 6th-round pick for him, get something for him when you already have options on the inside like Steve Avila and even Bo Limmer at center there. So that was good. Obviously, keeping Stafford was big to keep you in Super Bowl contention. Getting to keep Alaric Jackson before he even hit the market, I'm telling you, I think this is one of the breakout stars the second half of 2024 this past season. He was one of the best tackles in football down the stretch, still at a very young age. He was really the one young left tackle that we had that could have hit the market in his mid-20s, but the Rams didn't let him get away, and really a reasonable price at $19 million a year. And then you look at the two free agent signings for me. Davante Adams, I mean, if you're going to replace Cooper Kupp, that's a pretty good place to go and get a future Hall of Famer like Davante Adams, who can still tear apart man-to-man coverage as that X-receiver while Puka Nacua flies all over the formation wherever he's going to be. I think Stafford's really going to love throwing to Adams, and we've talked about it. Poona Ford, man. I mean, you look at this defensive line for the Rams. This was one of the best run defenders in football last year. Just a guy who makes
awesome.
Just a guy who makes everybody else's life easier. Like, think about trying to run on the Rams now on first down, and it was a move specifically designed to beat the Philadelphia Eagles. I think we can agree on that. They got teed off on by Saquon Barkley in that offensive line twice. They do not want that to happen again. Poona Ford and Kobe Turner on early downs. Have fun running between the tackles on first and second down, honestly. And then you've got Braden Fisk. What it allows him to do is he can be in on early downs, obviously, but more of a pass rusher, more of a versatile guy who can play from several different alignments. Used to be an edge player all the way back in his days at Western Michigan, right? I think what you have on this defensive line now with Fisk, with Turner, with obviously Jared Verse, with Poona Ford. I know they've lost a couple guys in Michael Hoyt and Bobby Brown, but to replace a Bobby Brown with a Poona Ford, I think it's a major plus. I think you talk about that defensive tackle rotation. Obviously, Jared Verse is the star. He's going to get all the talk. He was Defensive Rookie of the Year, but you've got a lot of depth on this D-line. It's a very dangerous unit.
All right, I'm going to look this up because I'm very curious. Because I was immediately going to say to you, what an incredible job the Rams have done, just totally revamping their front seven with younger guys that you can all believe in. And so I will tell you what their projected front seven is right now. But this was their front seven 2 years ago. So at the beginning of March, before free agency of 2023, it was A'Shawn Robinson, Greg Gaines, Aaron Donald, Leonard Floyd, Ernest Jones, Taven Howard, and Michael Hoyt. So that was the Rams 2 years ago. And today, hold on. Trying to refresh the page. It's not happening for me.
Live TV at its finest. You want me to find it?
Live TV at its finest, folks. All right, I got to go back to the beginning. Hold on.
I can do it if
I messed up. Stick with me. It's coming. Braden Fisk, Poona Ford, Kobe Turner, Byron Young, Omar Spates, Jared Verse. It's just completely different. Completely different. There's not a single name that is the same from what we had 2 years ago. Obviously, not having Aaron Donald's name in there is not ideal. But they have not only gotten young, they've gotten extremely productive. So when we talk about the Los Angeles Rams and being a great franchise, this is the stuff I'm talking about. It's looking at an area of their team that is getting a little bit older, that they're going to turn the page from, that, some other teams, it might take a long time. Maybe they don't recover from it. Maybe they just go, we'll replace one guy at a time. We'll be fine. The Rams went, nope, pushing the flush button. When Aaron Donald retired, they went, we're done with all of this. We're changing this entire defensive line. And over the last 2 years, in my opinion, they have totally reshaped that defensive line in a way where you have so much faith for them moving forward 2-3 years down the line. So I could not be more impressed with how the Rams have navigated losing one of the best football players of all time and sort of the hope that they've been able to instill in their front seven at that time. So, Les Snead, Sean McVay, just a great job having the same sort of vision with team building and making it happen.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at the depth chart right now. Every single player on every single defensive lineman on their roster, except for Poona Ford, was drafted either last year or either in 2023 or 2024. Right. I mean, it's just they decided, okay, we can't. It's almost a submission to we can't replace Aaron Donald. That's not possible. He might be the greatest defensive tackle that's ever lived. We have to build a unit now. Now we have to build an entire unit with depth and talent. Obviously, they hit the home run with Jared Verse in the first round, but it's a brilliant job they've done. And I think this defense, when you look at the way they fixed the safety position last year too, I think all you're missing here from this defense is one more linebacker and another corner. I think corner could very well be something they target in this draft. And I think that was a big part going back to re-signing Alaric Jackson. There was a while there before he had signed where I was constantly projecting left tackle, somebody like Josh Connerly or maybe a Josh Simmons to the Rams. Now, they don't have to worry about that. Their offensive line is set. Obviously, maybe a tight end. I still think there's the Sean McVay conspiracy about a tight end that's possible if Colston Loveland's within range, but I think it's more likely you're talking about linebacker, you're talking about cornerback for this team. If you complete this defense at those two spots, got a dangerous unit that is very much a contender in the NFC.
Chops in the chat is throwing this out there. Have not seen it yet. What do you guys think the likelihood is of a trade involving Chris Olave to New England for Joe Milton and picks? We've got Joe Milton trade speculations going on here. Joe Milton with an insane last game of the season for the New England Patriots, and now we're talking about him as a pivotal piece for a Chris Olave trade. You know, the Olave trade is sort of interesting to look at. This is a guy that's unfortunately suffered a lot of concussions early on in his NFL career. He's a great receiver when he's healthy, but the New Orleans Saints, I mean, we have mocked wide receiver to the New Orleans Saints at number 9 overall at times in the first round because they have to think about it. Rashid Shaheed's coming off major knee injury. Chris Olave's got those concussions that he's had to work through and come back from, and you hope he never has another concussion for the rest of his NFL career, but the more that you have, the more likely it is that you're going to keep having these concussions, and so it's hard to move forward, and I wonder if they're going to look at this Chris Olave situation, and potentially if they're rebuilding in a lot of other ways, which it feels like the New Orleans Saints never do, would they be willing to say, hey, let's try to get as much as we possibly can for Chris Olave right now. Let somebody else sort of take the risk on him there. New England would be a great spot to do it. So I'm not convinced that the Saints are looking to move on from Olave, but it is a very intriguing proposition there from Chops in the chat.
No, I agree. It's intriguing. I think it would take more. I'm not sure that the Saints would be all that interested in Joe Milton. I don't know if that's the team for that, especially when you consider, well, now you don't have a Chris Olave to throw to, right? You're looking at Rashid Shaheed coming off a knee injury, and obviously Derek Carr is still being there, so Milton wouldn't start in 2025 anyway, unless, you know, they felt like Carr was ineffective or he got hurt again. But if I'm the Saints, Olave is probably the one guy I wouldn't trade because you're trying to find those young foundational players that you can build around, and Olave, as long as he's healthy, is one of them. But New England, it feels odd with New England with the number of big-name receivers that have been on the market, and yet they haven't been able to land any of them, right? I think especially about DK Metcalf, T. Higgins and his situation with Cincinnati, obviously say a Deebo Samuel going to Washington. It just feels like New England's in this rut right now of trying to find weapons for Drake May. Can I throw one more thing at you? Because the guys behind the glass and all of our people on our content team behind the scenes just so desperately want your reaction to this.
Yes, go ahead.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have signed Denver Broncos punter Riley Dixon to a 2-year contract. How do you feel about that, Trev? You know, like that special teams matters too. They were just clamoring for a punter announcement, so I'm giving it to them. It's your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so I feel like it fits best. But yeah, we got what does that mean? Jay Camardo's out of there? Is that what we're doing here? What are we doing with the Bucs punters? With your offense, do you ever even have to punt again? You got Chris Godwin back.
Long out of there. Camardo's long out of there. Look, our content director, Gordon, said it's a good signing. I'll trust him there because he's probably got the numbers in front of him, and I don't have the numbers of punters offhand. The thing that I love the most about this deal is that it simply means that Tampa will not be drafting a punter, which I could not be more excited about because you always just get a little bit nervous when teams are drafting special teamers. So do love that. Somebody in the Mahal in the chat says Tampa doesn't punt much.
Do you still get Aguayo flashbacks?
Yes, of course I get Aguayo flashbacks. Wake up in a cold sweat at night thinking about how he was used as a second-round pick. You know what the most traumatizing thing about Roberto Aguayo is? It's not the fact that he was drafted in the second round. It's the fact that he was the most clutch and accurate kicker in college football history in some of the biggest games for national championship and college football playoff runs for that Florida State team. And then he was just bad in the league. That's what gives you nightmares. If you, obviously Tampa overdrafted him in the second round objectively, but if there was going to be any time to draft a kicker, it's him. He hit every single kick. All of the biggest moments, rivalry games, bowl games, national championships, college football playoffs. And that's the thing that matters most, right? When we talk about special teamers and kickers, it's all between the ears. And how clutch are you? Are you an assassin?
And Florida State's the kicker factory. They've had them all.
Dude, and it's like that's the craziest part about the Aguayo pick for me is that it should have worked. logically, you can talk yourself into drafting a kicker high, thinking that you've solved the issue, that you solved the great mystery of, is he going to be clutch in big moments? Because Aguayo had been throughout his entire college career, and then he was just terrible in the league. So I'll never draft a kicker for that reason. Never.
They can't all be Sebastian Janikowski.
Yeah, Seabass, legend. Okay, let's do, I guess, a little rapid recap here. We've talked about most teams, a lot of teams. I think we've talked about a lot of the big signings that have been made over the last 24 hours specifically, but there's a couple of teams that we haven't touched on yet. The Arizona Cardinals, relatively quiet signing period, but they did get Josh Sweat, which I love. That was the biggest area of need that they had. Now they have Darius Robinson as well on the inside. So they've got some pieces on the defensive line. They don't feel like they have to now draft defensive line where they're at in the middle parts of the first round, although they certainly still could. Also signed Akeem Davis-Gaither to the linebacker level for a 2-year deal. They brought back Baron Browning, which I like, brought back Evan Brown, which I like. Thoughts on the Arizona Cardinals as we're kind of scrolling through, just rapid fire hitting some teams here.
Yeah, I was figuring that both Eagles defenders, the both of the high price guys, that Josh Sweat and Milton Williams would be targeted here. They went with Sweat, and I got to be honest with you, I really like the re-sign of Baron Browning. He played well for them down the stretch last year after they traded for him, so I think you start to feel good. I don't know that Browning, obviously that's not necessarily starter money. 2 years and $15 million is more rotational money. He's a good pass rusher. He's been better in run defense in the past, and I think he just needs a consistent shot to succeed. So I don't think it precludes them from maybe taking another edge rusher at 16. I think they're one of the more intriguing teams in the draft. They've got options when you're talking about a right tackle maybe, somebody on the defensive line, an outside corner. I think they have a lot of options in this draft to make their team better, but you have to like what they've done off the edge, especially with Sweat and Browning there as the main pass rushers all of a sudden. And again, Browning running a top 20 pass rush win rate last year. I think he was one of the more underrated signings. The fact that they got to keep him was a really good move.
Yeah, if we scroll down a little bit to the Kansas City Chiefs, they bring back Nick Bolton. They bring back Marquise Brown. They franchise tag Trey Smith, so they didn't let him get out of the building. Jalen Moore being sort of their big free agent there, just taking a massive swing at tackle, hoping to get something there for them. It's hard to go into the draft thinking the Chiefs are better than they were a year ago, but this is also a team that has been on the cusp of a three-peat, right? They've been to the Super Bowl 3 straight seasons, and so even if it's a little bit of a step back, you feel okay about Kansas City there. I'm just very intrigued to see how they navigate the draft, because you talk about trying to set yourself up to where you don't have to draft a certain position. This is one of those teams where if they don't come out of the first round with an offensive lineman to believe in, an offensive tackle, I should say, to believe in, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty for this team going into the 2025 season.
Well, here's the only thing with that. With Jalen Moore, now you would assume they're paying him to start at left tackle, right? They're going to take the gamble after he's filled in for Trent Williams the last couple of years when he's been hurt. I would assume that he's going to start at left tackle. I think the question now becomes on the interior now. Do we talk about maybe at 31, is it somebody like a Tyler Booker for them to come in and play left guard? Because I think that's really the problem spot now. And obviously, look, they're paying Jalen Moore, they're paying Jawan Taylor. Those two guys are going to start at tackle. I don't know if Wanye Morris could move inside. There's been talks about Kingsley Suamataia moving inside to left guard, but it's a lot of gambling you're taking on that left side. So do they maybe take a safer prospect at left guard, maybe a Tyler Booker at 31, maybe a Donovan Jackson somewhere in that range, or trade back a few spots to get him? I think that's the real question for me. And then still think we need to talk about this defensive line, right? We talked earlier about they lost Tershawn Wharton. Chris Jones is obviously still elite, but he's not getting younger. George Karlaftis is good, but there's not a ton of depth on their defensive line either, especially when it comes to run defense. So I still wonder if we're talking at 31 at the end of the day about a defensive lineman, right? I'm not sure if it would be somebody like a Walter Nolan or a Derek Harmon that would be kind of, a run stopping, somebody to help them on the inside. They also have four picks inside the top 100 in a deep defensive line draft, so I think that's going to be an area of focus. But yeah, they got to get better in the trenches, I think, on both sides of the ball, and certainly the left side of that offensive line once again is going to be under the microscope after really being the reason that they didn't finish the Super Bowl run this year.
All right. Let's look at who's still available. I'm trying to think of what's a good way to leave the people on a high note here as we're sort of wrapping up this show. I think a lot of people are good with the analysis that we have on teams and some of the players that have already signed, but now we should talk about some of the players that haven't signed yet, kind of like we did with quarterbacks on yesterday's show. Let's talk about the guys who are still available, who could be going to certain places. Maybe some players who were surprised have not been signed yet. So if you guys go over to PFF.com, again, you can see all of the players who are still left available. You can see that on the tracker, but we also have a best available 2025 free agents that we are updating as well. So you can specifically see that tracker if you want. If I'm looking at that right now, the very top two at the top of the list, Amari Cooper and Stephon Diggs. Not sure if we're super surprised that those guys haven't been signed yet. Amari Cooper, obviously a vet, and Stephon Diggs, coming off of the knee injury. We've got guys like Cam Robinson, Tevin Jenkins. I'm very intrigued for where Tevin Jenkins is going to sign with a team that still needs offensive guard. I'm thinking of some fits there for him.
Seattle, no question. Any of them, Seattle.
Seattle, the Texans, right? The Texans now come to mind as well.
Bengals.
I got to tell you, I'll tell you a quiet one since they lost two guys on the interior, whether it's guard or center. But I know they have a couple young players in Tanner Bortolini and Dalton Tucker who played a lot this past year. But the Colts just lost Ryan Kelly and Will Fries. And I know Fries didn't play a whole lot, so maybe they believe in Dalton Tucker at right guard. But I think we could be looking at some reinforcements inside for the Colts, depending on how much they trust in those young kids. Staying in it feels like the entire AFC South, actually, when you look at all four of those teams needing something. The Titans maybe a right guard. The Jaguars looking a little more set, but maybe you still sign some depth. I think I'm with you. I think there's some really interesting names when you look at this interior offensive line group. Tevin Jenkins, Kevin Zeitler, Mekhi Becton, Will Hernandez, Dalton Reisner, Matt Pryor. It feels like there's starting caliber players left and right.
People in the chat are yelling us Chargers for one of these interior offensive linemen. I think you throw the Chargers in there as well, and you mentioned a handful of names of guys who have not signed yet, and so I think the Chargers could absolutely be coming away with one of those players. Mekhi Becton being one of them. Yeah, I'm curious what Tyron Smith's market is at this point, because he didn't officially retire, right? So I don't know what his market is going to be there. Zadarius Smith, Von Miller, Joey Bosa, 3 veteran pass rushers who, again, I don't know what their market is going to be. Very clearly, it's much more supplementary or complementary to whatever the edge rush plan is going to be than it is, okay, we're going to sign this guy, we're going to feel great about it, and he's going to be an impact player for us. Because if that was the case, I think those guys would have been already off the board. So they're sitting here still waiting at a tampering period. I wonder if we wait till tomorrow to get these signings official before we see these teams start to sign those veteran pass rushers there. Justin Reed is somebody who I feel like is really underrated at this point. I don't know where he is going to go, but I'm just very surprised that, and just safety overall, right? We had the conversation about Justin Simmons last year, and we were wondering why was he available for so long before he ended up going with the Atlanta Falcons, and now he's still a free agent now, and Juan Thornhill is still out there as well. It just doesn't feel like the league values the free agent safety market nearly the way that we believe that they would, right? Going back to even the conversation about Javon Holland. Holland, gets signed by the New York Giants, but for a lot less than we thought was going to be the case, and it was an interesting you could throw in Jeremy Chin as well, going over to the Raiders, and what I think was a pretty team-friendly deal for what he can do on the back end. So, man, the safety spot and then those veteran edge rushers are guys that I'm very, very intrigued on. Anybody in the chat, if you like any of those names, shout out any of the connections that you might have with some of those teams.
I'll tell you, I think it's safety, not just Reed, but there's a couple other really starting caliber players. When you talk about Juan Thornhill's another guy who can play that center field role for you on the back end, and Julian Blackmon's someone I thought that would have a better market. I think he's at the very least very much in the same sense as, say, Trayvon Merrick or Andre Sisco or that tier of guys where you just got a solid starter, right? And he played a little more free safety last year after moving around a bit his previous years. I think these are guys who teams are going to get good value on. It just, you're right, it doesn't feel like the safety market has exploded the way that we thought that it would. And obviously Cam Bynum got $15 million a year. Javon Holland got 15. Hufanga got 15. That seems to be the cap. Merrick got 17. I don't know if any of the rest of these guys are going to get quite in that range, but I think if you're talking about anywhere between the $8 and $12 million range for any of these safeties, these are starting caliber players. Especially, you mentioned Justin Reed with all the Super Bowl experience that he has in Kansas City, right? I figured that would be valuable to somebody out there looking for both a talented and experienced player. I think the safety market and those edge rushers, like you mentioned, I want to throw in one more for you, just curious.
Sure.
On those veterans, DeMarcus Lawrence, too. I know he had a down year, had some injuries last year, but is there anything left in the tank for DeMarcus Lawrence that somebody would be interested in also? That just feels like he feels like someone in the last year that feels like he's dropped off the face of the earth, but I think he could still be valuable just like those other guys you mentioned in a part-time role.
Okay. We got to go back to the chat because I'm scrolling up because I totally missed a super chat. So we got to hit this super chat really quick, certainly before we get out of here. This from Hayden. I'm a Panthers fan. Can you give your opinion on our signing? Shout out to Hayden. Appreciate the super chat. Appreciate you getting in the chat. I'm sorry that I did not see that one earlier, but we're getting to it now. So the Carolina Panthers, if we go over to the tracker, just making sure that I'm pulling up the full signings that they have here. Trayvon Merrick gets safety. And then Bobby Brown on the defensive line, Tershawn Wharton on the defensive line, extending J.C. Horn, signing Patrick Shield in the second. We already kind of talked about this earlier in the show, but I like what they've done. They missed out on the splash signing of Milton Williams, which kind of sucks. But I think that they have done a good job of supplementing some of their major needs with positions that you can at least feel good about getting some extra impact going into the 2025 season. You're getting an upgraded playmaking ability with Merrick playing at the safety level. You're bringing back J.C. Horn. You're hoping that he is that leader of that secondary, whether you're drafting a corner early or not. He's going to be your centerpiece moving forward. You hope that that deal looks good now because we talked about this yesterday. It looks like an overpay for J.C. Horn right now because of all the games that he has missed and how he just has not been out there and available for you. But Derek Stingley Jr., Trent McDuffie, Sauce Gardner, Deron Bland, all of those guys are becoming available next offseason, so you're trying to get ahead of those contract deals. So I like the vision. I like what they were doing there. So shout out to Dan Morgan for that. And then the defensive line. They just got new bodies along the defensive line, and it allows them, in my opinion, to take the most impactful player that they believe is going to be there at number 8, whether that be a Tetairoa McMillan to give them a wide receiver 1. I don't think it would be a Mason Graham anymore, but maybe an edge rusher, a Shamar Stewart. If you believe that of Jalen Walker, I think Donovan Ezraku going at 8 would be high, but I love the dude. So I'm just throwing out some edge rushers who could be available for them at number 8. Maybe it's even a trade back because you feel good about these edge rushers. So Hayden, that would be my assessment of the Carolina Panthers. Despite not landing Milton Williams, I do like a lot of what they were able to do and how they were able to get some good football players on their team. What do you think, Dalton?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. If you're not going to get the star players, then you fill it out with starters. Again, it's kind of like the Washington Commanders did last year. Get enough viable starters in there to make yourself a respectable unit, right? You mentioned a bunch of guys who are going to play significant snaps. I think actually a pretty good move, too, was re-signing Mike Jackson, who played decent ball for him last year, just 2 years and just over $14 million. So you're looking at maybe corner gets eliminated as that need with that 8th overall pick. Maybe they supplement the depth later on, but I'm looking at this group and the depth that it has, and obviously the emphasis on stopping the run with some of these guys. And unless Tetairoa McMillan's on the board, and we have our wide receiver 1 theory with Carolina here, I have to think it's still going to be an impact player on the defensive line or somewhere in the front 7 very early in this draft, right? Get another star player to go along with Derek Brown. You've got a good amount of starters. You've got depth guys. They need help at linebacker, too. I think that could be an emphasis on day 2. But I don't think the goals change here as it relates to the draft in this group of signings. I think it's a good group of signings. They kind of spread that money over, a bunch of different guys as opposed to getting Milton Williams, who it would have been fun to have next to Derek Brown, but you still have Derek Brown as the star. You have J.C. Horn as the star on the back end. Now you've got Trayvon Merrick. When you have a defense, when you have the lowest graded defense in football, as bad as they were last year, and as many injuries as they went through, you're just looking for stability. I think this set of signings adds stability. There's some continuity with Horn and Jackson at corner. And again, I would still think the most likely outcome with that 8th overall pick is somebody off the edge, one of those pass rushers. If it's Jalen Walker, if it's James Pierce Jr., if it's somebody like Mike Green, if they feel good about that situation, or maybe I think they signed 2 defensive tackles here, plus they have Derek Brown. I don't think it would be Mason Graham. I think it's more likely someone off the edge, but I think the goals remain the same. Just keep pumping talent into this defense because there just wasn't enough of it last year.
Sam in the chat saying, I'm so excited for the draft. You know what? I am too. I'm pulling an audible. Let's do a mock draft. Let's do it. Come on. Let's just do a mock draft. Let's run through a mock draft.
Panthers
really
mock draft? Or any team?
I'm just talking about like a mock, like quickly. Let's go through. I don't know how much time we got left, but we could almost maybe, if we do it quick enough, We can maybe even go through a full first round and just talk about some updated team needs. I don't want to be here for the next 3 hours, but like I really want to get to this. I want to talk about some of those
snap decisions. We've got 20 seconds on the clock each pick. You want to go back and forth? You want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. It doesn't have to be that quick. I mean, we say mocks all the time. We're like, all right, 20 seconds each, and then it ends up being a little bit longer. But the chat's going crazy. They want us to do a mock draft here.
I'm going 20 seconds or less. We're getting to tell you what.
20. That's impossible. You got too much ball knowledge up here.
Well, of course. I could save some for.
You got too many takes. You got too many takes.
I could save some for the next time. You know how these things go. I can hold it. I could withhold the information that I have if I have any.
All right. Let's pull up the beautiful PFF mock draft simulator, which you guys can go use over at pff.com. If you got a full PFF subscription, you could check all of that out over at pff.com/mock. You could do as many mock drafts as you want. You can do 1, 2, 3, or even 7 rounds in this mock draft. We're going to do a full first round mock draft and see how quickly we can keep this a little bit snappy. Let's try to just do it in, we want to do like 30 minutes. Does that work for you? 30 minutes? I feel like that's enough.
What, a minute per pick? Sure. We get 1 minute?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll try to keep it under a minute. No promises.
Let's do that. David in the chat saying shot clock at 30 seconds. We're going to have a lot of shot clock violations here. All right, you want to go number 1? Let's do it. Let's enter the draft. You could pick number 1 overall for the Tennessee Titans. When it comes to the Titans, I'm just going to make sure that I have all of these signings pulled up. Relatively quiet signing for the signing period for the Tennessee Titans. They signed Dan Moore Jr. for a lot of money, 82 cold ones. And then they also signed Cody Barton to help out their interior linebacker room, released Harold Landry. What are they doing at number 1? What do you got?
They've been looking at some of these veteran quarterbacks. There's supposedly still interest in Russell Wilson. I don't think that does enough to move the needle as far as this decision. I think Tennessee's going quarterback. I think they're staying at 1. I don't think they trade down. I think they're going to take Cam Ward.
Okay, so you think that they're a Cam Ward team. If there was a team that you think would most likely trade up to 1, who is it?
The Giants, if they liked one or the other enough that they felt like they had that first pick, or if they needed that first pick to get the guy that they wanted.
All right, I get down with it. Number 2, Cleveland Browns.
It's probably not Abdul Carter now. We have to think they're not going to double up like that now and just try to win.
Or will they? Dude, how sick would that be?
I mean, it would be sick. They still can't score. Every game would be 10-6, but
no, that's what you pay. Hold on. That's what you pay Kevin O'Connell for.
Kevin O'Connell,
not Kevin O'Connell. I'm sorry, Kevin Stefanski.
Different Kevin. Kevin Stefanski.
Come on, I wasn't that far off. They're both named Kevin.
I was like, wait, did they trade for Kevin O'Connell? You threw me off there. All right. I mean, you could go the Steelers route of just trying to win with a D line and not a whole lot else. That's your call.
It's a tried and true strategy that I do think has worked out a lot. Wall is screaming that it's Abdul Carter.
Well, they're going to see a whole lot of max protections against him. They have that. That's for sure.
The Browns said that they viewed Travis Hunter as a wide receiver.
Yes.
So this does lean into them liking Travis Hunter for him to. No, I'm picking Abdul Carter. I'm picking Abdul Carter too. We're going to put Myles Garrett on one side. We're going to put Abdul Carter on the other. And we're going to say, try to stop us.
And you're going to win every game. You're going to win every week 9-6. We're going to get 9-6 games in Cleveland every single week. Hell yeah.
You know what 9-6 is? It's fine. As long as Cleveland's got 9. Am I right, Tyler? Tyler's behind the glass. He better be fist pumping back there because I'm helping the defensive line get a lot better and making some premium positions. You're up with the Giants at 3.
All right. I hate to do it twice in a row on you, but I think the Giants also, we've seen they're desperate for a quarterback. They're in on every veteran, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, blah, blah, blah. None of that is long-term answers. I know there's been talks about this guy dropping and going wherever, but I really feel like if he's here, the Giants are going to pull the trigger. They just need a quarterback so bad. They have Malik Neighbors. They re-signed Darius Slayton. They can find more running back speed at running back later in the draft. Shedeur Sanders will still be a New York Giant. He was wearing the Giants' cleats. He was throwing balls in the streets to Malik Neighbors. He was dapping up Brian Daboll. I'm going to take a quarterback with 2 of the first 3 picks here.
I just do not think that's happening. I just don't think it's happening. Don't think it's happening.
Daboll and Shane, they need a solution. And at least right now, if Shedeur Sanders is their only solution that they feel like is, and maybe they don't feel like it, maybe they don't, but I still feel like the Giants, through all the smoke screens, they need something they can call at least a chance at a long-term quarterback.
Number 4, there's no way I'm letting Travis Hunter get any further than this. If he gets to number 4 overall, he is the Patriots wide receiver 1. With them signing Carlton Davis to be able to play corner, they don't feel like they have to have Travis Hunter to play corner all the time, although they could certainly put him on the field and allow him to play corner. That's a pretty nice cornerback trio there, with Marcus Jones being able to play in the slot as well. So you feel good about whatever matchup you're throwing Travis Hunter's way every single week, whether he's playing a couple of snaps at cornerback, or the other way around. I think he'll mainly just play wide receiver, but I don't know how much. I've said this all offseason. I don't know how much, if you play him primarily as a wide receiver, you're going to get out of him as a corner, but like maybe you play him at safety. Like maybe there's some snaps where you go, hey, just play like single high and just go ball hawk on this player on this drive or whatever. So it gives you some secondary flexibility, but I'll go Travis Hunter at number 4. There's just no way the Patriots pass on him, especially with Mac Hollins currently as their wide receiver 1 there. So you're up with Jacksonville at 5.
I think there would have been a good argument, depending on what the Pats think of him at receiver, is that I still think Tedrow McMillan's an option there. Absolutely, but I get it. Hunter, too talented to pass up. This is a guy that with Jacksonville at 5 here, they made a couple of signings on the offensive line, so maybe I'm less inclined to go with a Will Campbell. I don't think they would go with a McMillan or a Ginty, an offensive weapon here. I really think Mason Graham is still in play here at 5. I think you fill out this defensive line. You've got Josh Hines-Allen. You've got Trayvon Walker. You've got, a good set of linebackers with Oluokun and Lloyd. I think we fill out this front 7 in the middle. I know he's undersized. I know arm length, all of that. But, again, I still feel like Mason Graham is one of the 3 or 4 best football players in this draft, and I think it'd be a great fit right in the middle of this Jacksonville defense. And also, think about James Gladstone coming from the Rams. I'm not saying at all that Mason Graham is Aaron Donald, but the impact that an interior guy like that can have on a defense and what he has seen Aaron Donald do in the past with the Rams, I'm still going to go Mason Graham here at 5 to Jacksonville.
I don't hate it, given what they've done in free agency, that they've addressed the offensive line first. Now, they could still go Armand Bembou, but I do think that Mason Graham's sort of back in play there at number 5. Las Vegas Raiders at number 6.
Ooh, you have a choice here. You have the choice.
Are you talking about between Tet and Genty?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of anybody else if I'm entertaining anybody else here. I don't really think so.
You could entertain a corner. That you could, if it's Barron or Will Johnson. I think that's not totally out of the realm.
No, Tetairoa McMillan it is.
Love it.
I love that setup for them with Tetairoa McMillan, especially with Geno Smith coming over, and he's already familiar with, okay, I know how to throw to a jump ball receiver in DK Metcalf. He already gets that. And so giving him a player who can win as a monster at the catch point, as a wide receiver 1, as a true sideline type of a wide receiver, I think is going to make Geno Smith feel right at home, because I like the offensive line they're cooking. And cooking up, I should say, and I like the running back options that we have later in this draft. So I'm going to go Tet here at number 6.
All right, so the Jets. I'm kind of eliminating options here. The two top quarterbacks are gone. They signed Brandon Stevens for $12 million a year at corner in free agency. I don't think they're going corner with this pick. I can't help but feel like Tyler Warren's never been more of a New York Jet than he is right now.
Over Membou, if he's there?
Membou's a possibility. I mean, I think they could find a value at right tackle or maybe someone later on, but I think they would have a hard time, especially with the stress of if they're going to run their offense, if Tanner Engstrand is going to run the offense the same way that they did in Detroit, and they're really trying to emphasize, okay, we need a weapon at that tight end spot, a two-way weapon as a blocker and as a receiver. I think Tyler Warren is going to be there. I think Aaron Glenn's going to love the attitude that he brings on the football field with and without the ball in his hands. I think it's still Tyler Warren.
All right, 8. I feel like it's setting up for Shamar Stewart. I really is.
Stewart, the Pierce.
No, I don't think, because I'm doing this mock draft is what I think will happen. I do not think the NFL regards James Pierce Jr. as a top 10 pick.
You think we think Stewart's a top 10 guy, even with just 4 sacks in his career? We think we're going that route?
I think that teams are much more willing to bet on Shamar Stewart just as the freak athlete. Again, when you put up numbers that put you in a category with Jadeveon Clowney, Myles Garrett, and Mario Williams in terms of your 40-yard dash, your 10-yard split, your explosive scores in the broad and the vert, those other three guys went number one overall. And the only reason why Shamar Stewart isn't going number one overall is because he didn't have that production. Number 8's a fine spot for him to bet on a player like that. And so if I'm following draft history and what we talked about with the Carolina Panthers, getting a safety, getting some depth, feeling good about that defensive line, no Tetro McMillan here. If he was here, it would tempt me, but I'm going Shamar Stewart at 8.
Got it. I think, okay, reasonable. It's going to be, we still feel it's going to be an edge defender. It's just a matter of which one they like the best. 9, the New Orleans Saints. So many needs. Just so many. Kills me.
Well,
Will Campbell's sitting on the board, too.
That he is.
Did we forget about Will Campbell? No, we wouldn't dare.
No.
So I'm kind of between Campbell and maybe the option of low moving costs also.
Yeah, absolutely.
The option of is it Campbell or Membu? Do we just plug and play Membu at right tackle? Or is there a thought about moving Fuaga back to his college position at right tackle and we'll go with Campbell on the left side? Or Campbell maybe plays inside or wherever you feel like. Where are you at? Where are you at on the percentage chance that Campbell's going to play tackle in the NFL?
I think he'll get a shot. I think he'll get a better shot. I don't know what the percentage is. I think he'll get a better shot than Peter Skoronski got. So, I actually do think that I think he will start at offensive tackle. I do. But all that to say, if we're going with how Mickey Loomis and the Saints have drafted throughout their history, they're picking Armand Membu. He's bigger, he's longer, he's faster.
Deal.
That's basically just how the Saints have operated along their trenches for as long as I can remember. It's up to those.
We'll go Membu then at 9. Plug and play right tackle. Move Trevor Penning inside. See if something else works for Penning. But now we've got Fuaga and Membu at tackle. One way or the other. Got to get better in the trenches, offensive or defensive line. I kind of like the offensive options here for them. I'll take Membu at 9 to the Saints.
I'm doing it.
I know you're doing it. I already knew you were doing it. I knew it was coming.
I'm taking Ashley Genty. I'm doing it. What a sick offense. DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Caleb Williams, revamped offensive line, Ashley Genty in the backfield. You got Cole Kmet as well. Ben Johnson's calling plays. The fantasy football community is going to go nuts over Chicago Bears players next year if this ends up being their offense. And I do think it's a possibility for Genty to be the 10th overall pick now to the Bears, given what they have done, how they have totally revamped that offensive line, specifically with Jonah Jackson, with Joe Thuney, and then signing Drew Dahlman as well. So I'm going Ashley Genty at 10. I had to do it.
I think right now, if he's available, he's the favorite. I would agree with that. I think defense, D-line, and even corner are still options there, but when you have a player as talented as Genty behind what I think is potentially a top 5 offensive line next year, I get it. I totally get it, and maybe even the favorite to win Offensive Rookie of the Year if he ends up in that spot. But we said that last year with a certain quarterback, and it wound up being the number 2 pick winning that.
Somebody in the chat said 3-peat offseason champs, the Chicago Bears. That's true. This one's different, though. This one feels a little bit different.
This one's different. Third time's a charm, I guess. All right, the Niners. I got options with the Niners. Will Campbell's on the board. Kelvin Banks is on the board. You know I love the fit of Kelvin Banks to San Francisco.
Mm-hmm. And they certainly need him.
They certainly do need him.
Now that they've officially lost Aaron Banks.
His Texas teammate, Jahdae Barron, would fit in so well. Oh, he would fit in that solid defense.
In the solid defense?
Yeah,
yes,
he would. He would. Is it Barron or
so would Will Johnson.
Will Johnson would too. Oh, there's options. Man, oh man. I'm sticking to my original. I still think it's Kelvin Banks. I'll go Kelvin Banks. The fit in the scheme, whether you can play the right side and maybe eventually take over the left side. Now they have a hole at left guard. If they do feel like he's an inside guy, they can put him right next to Trent Williams at left guard, and you're set there. I think Kelvin Banks is a perfect system fit. He gives you options, and they still need offensive linemen in San Francisco.
Dallas Cowboys at 12. They re-signed Odigizua. They brought in Robert Jones to play one of the guard spots. They signed Solomon Thomas. They drafted Javonte Williams, or they signed Javonte Williams as well. No Ashton Genty on the board to tempt them here. Maybe you think Omarion Hampton could go this high. I think he's a really good player, but I don't think he's going to go this high. I have been putting Jahad Campbell at this spot for a while now, and I think free agency just continues to make me believe that that's going to be the case. He is the guy that I think can impact the field for them in a variety of ways, and they really do need it. So unless there's an offensive lineman that they really feel great about that they want to plug in here, maybe they do. Campbell's still there, so like, do they think that that's the one that throws a wrench in this? Like, do they think that Campbell could basically just be Zach Martin, right? Like, okay, we're going to plug him into one of those guard spots. We're losing Zach Martin to retirement. Do we think that this guy is just going to be a plug-and-play type of a guard who could be a potential perennial all-pro for you, like Zach Martin
Or,
does?
I mean, and I know they just drafted him last year, but it was a rough rookie year for Tyler Guyton. And there were even rumors at one point about, do we find some veteran competition to get in there? And I know they just drafted him in the late 20s last year, but Tyler Guyton really struggled through his rookie year. Does Campbell give you an option at left tackle and we move Guyton somewhere else?
All right, let's go Campbell. Campbell's the one guy that I can think about here over oh, shoot. I wanted to draft Will Campbell instead of Javonte Campbell,
that Campbell.
but I just said Campbell.
Oh, so you're picking between
Quinn,
two
who's running the
Campbells.
mock draft sim. And
It's all right. I'll run it back.
No,
back.
it's fine because this one also makes sense. It's not that big of a deal. We can keep rolling with it. I haven't seen a Will Campbell slide like this, so I'm very intrigued if this actually continues to happen. But just so you guys know, I was trying to go Will Campbell, and that's my bad. Proper communication's important as the host to the producers, and I failed.
I mean, there's too many Campbells on the shelf. It's like shopping for soup. Sorry, I had to. It came to me. I had to do it. This is why this mock draft is going to take longer than it should.
All right, you're up at 13 with the Dolphins.
Well, you know what? Okay, so Jahad Campbell is the thing. You're going with it for Dallas, then?
I have to. Yeah. We can't go back.
For the sake of desperation on the offensive line, I'll stop Will Campbell's slide here with Miami at 13. And look, we'll see if he's the best fit for Mike McDaniel's system. At this point, I don't really think it matters. I think for the Dolphins to get an offensive lineman this talented would be a big deal, right? Teron Armstead retiring. We don't know what they feel about Patrick Paul. They just lost Robert Jones, their left guard, in free agency. They signed James Daniels, which I think if he's healthy is a good move. But whether it be at left tackle or left guard, Will Campbell's going to help them somewhere on that offensive line. Too talented to pass up here for Miami, who needs desperate offensive line help.
Are we sure this is the right Campbell? Before I click it, how many Campbells are in this draft?
These are the only Campbells I'm aware of.
Cool.
Okay, those are the only guys.
Lock it in. I'll switch them on the final graphic. No one will know.
It's fine. It's fine.
No. You're fine. It's fine. The Indianapolis Colts at 14. So the Colts, they were busy signing Daniel Jones, of course, to week one money, $14 million. They signed Charvarius Ward as one of their outside corners. They signed safety Cam Bynum as well. They lost a couple of guys along the interior offensive line. If you didn't go Will Campbell here, I would have thought about going that for the Indianapolis Colts. If he were to make it there, I think that would have made a lot of sense for them. Man, what are
throwing something at you real quick that I think is
go ahead.
This is
a different format here for the.
I'm seeing something on their depth chart. I just want to confirm it real quick. Have the Colts signed Mark Glowinski? I think that might be.
No, that's one of their free agents.
Oh, he's already gone. I'm sorry. Okay, sorry. It's highlighted green here. Okay, I was looking through the. Okay, sorry. Go on.
Oh. Do we? Oh.
Another edge rusher? Is it Jahdae Barron? I do like Jahdae Barron.
Is this a Nicky Manwari spot? Because they didn't sign Julian Blackmon. They signed Cam Bynum. But then if you get Nicky Manwari to play, independent of what you think of Nicky Manwari, he's going top 20. He's going somewhere in the top 20.
Yes, it's just is he the fit there? Because it feels like you're going to have two box safeties at that point with Manwari and Bynum.
I don't know. You think Bynum's going to? Yeah.
I think I would. I think I'd rather take Starks.
Ooh.
Manwari's probably going to go, like I would think about if he's going to go to maybe a Cincinnati or even a Tampa Bay. But I think I would, for this team, for the Colts, I would rather have Starks. Because I think Bynum's kind of that floating around box safety, and if you have two of them, then what do you have over the top?
Yeah. All right, I'll take Starks. I'm gonna take Starks here for the Indianapolis Colts. I didn't see what the chat was thinking here. Oh, he's saying that they need a tight end. They could have gone Colson Loveland there as well. That could have been the case. I don't hate that, but obviously we went Starks here because I like the fit of him and Cam Bynum. So you're up at number 15. I can't see what team that is because it's the Falcons.
The Atlanta Falcons. Well, I have a choice between edge rusher and corner, and there's plenty of good ones. What have the Falcons signed already? I feel like they haven't done a whole lot, right? They don't have any money.
Ooh, Christian Fulton just signed to the Kansas City Chiefs. A little 2-year, $20 million contract.
All right, that's fun. A little more help at corner, veteran help at corner. Usually they're taking their day 3 picks and all that. Okay.
I like it. I like that. I like that signing for the Kansas City Chiefs. I like it.
Edge rusher or corner for the Falcons? What's it going to be? Edge rusher, James Pierce Jr. We're going with it. Yeah. I had thoughts about Will Johnson, but I think this is a spot, Arizona here at corner, that could also be an opportunity because now. Yeah,
I would go Will Johnson here. That's who I would go with for the Cardinals. It's the pick that I continue to gravitate towards. I don't know. Jahdae Barron is still on the board. I don't know if they would like Jahdae Barron over Will Johnson. I feel like they would like the length. Feel like they'd want the length that Will Johnson gives you at over 6 feet tall. So
I think they could certainly succeed with either. I wouldn't have an issue with either if Johnson was off the board and you took Barron. I don't think there's any issue there. But yeah, I get it. I mean, Johnson, when he's healthy, he's premier, man.
Yeah, give me Will Johnson here for the Arizona Cardinals.
Bengals. All right, well. You know what? Let's do this. Usually I get Eli doing this on the college show. Quinn, are you still on the mic back there?
Yep, I'm here.
What do you want for the Bengals here at 17?
This is predictive, right? And not what I want?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Predictive, and this is just based off what has gone on thus far in free agency. They need a starting guard. They need 2 starting guards. They need pass rush help. I think they need a starting linebacker. They signed Oren Burks, but I think that's an Akeem Davis-Gaither replacement. Yeah.
I mean, well, if they're going to trade Hendrickson, they desperately need edge help now.
Yeah. But as of right now, he's still on the roster.
True.
That's what I'm trying to factor in.
Yeah, but they still need an edge rusher no matter what.
Right. They just need anybody that can get after the passer.
He's a little lower on the board. I don't know if they would do it. Is how much further are we sliding down Jalen Walker?
That could solve 2 needs.
If it's maybe.
In theory.
That's a good. Yeah, I've never thought about Jalen Walker here, but I think that's a good shout out. I could see him going here.
I like Ezeraku. I don't know if that's what they would do.
He's a stud.
I think if they were going to take an edge, I think it would be Mykel Williams. They were in on him at the Senior Bowl. He fits their measurements. Better run defender than pass rusher.
All right, we can go Mykel. It's a predictive mock, so.
All right, predictive. Yeah, I think I could see that happening.
Going Mykel.
Right.
I don't love it. I would take Ezeraku, but predictive.
Mykel it is.
Seattle Seahawks are next at number 18. They signed Sam Darnold. They're down DK. I mean, this is basically, it has to be wide receiver. Is this Matthew Golden? Is this a Matthew Golden spot? I feel like the league's a lot higher on Matthew Golden than they are Luther Bird in the third, and they desperately need a wide receiver now at this point, not having Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf. So you need something to help out Sam Darnold. It can't just be Jack Smith and Jigba. All due respect to Jake Bobo, the legend. They also need interior offensive line badly, very badly.
I still think that's a day 2. That's a day 2 thing. I think if you do it here, you're reaching a little bit. You have, I think, 50 and 52 in the second round, or even if you wanted to package something and trade up for a certain guy, you could. But I think here, I think now receiver, you're right. With Burden, Ibuka, and Golden all on the board, I do think receiver becomes the play here. I'm with you.
All right, Matthew Golden. I think Matthew Golden comes off the board pretty quick. So let's go Matthew Golden here for the Seattle Seahawks, given what they have done in free agency. Now you got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at number 19.
Got options. I don't need a receiver in Tampa Bay, that's for sure. I really don't need, if we're looking
goddamn right you don't.
I don't need anything on offense if we're looking at Tampa Bay, right? Not in the first round. But I'll tell you what, I got options. I got Jahdae Barron sitting there. I've got Jalen Walker sitting there. I've got Mike Green sitting there. I know there's some other question marks about him, but talent-wise, I think he's one of the 3 best edge rushers in this draft. I'm with you, Trev. I mean, He's got it. Ezaraku's really good. As talent-wise, I think I would go Green over Ezaraku. That's probably my only thing here with that. But
I think it's one of those 2 players, to be honest with you.
Green or Ezaraku?
Yes. Yeah, I really do.
I think it's Green then. I have Green a spot or 2 ahead of Ezaraku in my edge rankings.
Well, hold on, wait. Before you hit that.
Or is it Jalen Walker?
I didn't think of Jalen Walker.
Because again, he's going.
Jahdae Barron's also on the board, and Barron is a perfect cover 3 corner.
He is. There's a couple of guys. Those are a couple of guys that it feels odd that we have them falling this low, but these things can happen. I mean, we've had some good players go already. This is another spot. If Jihad Campbell was available, I think that might be the pick here as well. But
I would agree. Man, who would they? Dude,
or is it Jahdae Barron for the value of it? It might be. Yeah, because they signed Hassan Reddick. They still have this hodgepodge of D linemen, pass rushers, Diaby, and is it Anthony Nelson that's just going to be there forever?
No, he's a free agent.
Oh, he's a free agent.
Tryon Shoyinka, I believe.
I'm sure. Sure Jason Light will re-sign him.
Tryon Shoyinka is a free agent. Will Golson's a free agent. Shaq Barrett's a free agent. Anthony Nelson's a free agent.
I'm kind of feeling Jahdae Barron. I think
we can do that.
I think it's too good to pass up here. I think honestly we've probably let him fall too far at this point. But I'm going with it. Get a corner. Then you have Dean and McCollum and Barron and Tyke Smith. That's living pretty good in the secondary.
No, I agree. I think you should go Barron here.
Done deal. Jahdae Barron.
Broncos. What do you want me to do, man? Colston Loveland. I'm sorry. I can't not switch it up. I'm sorry. I know we're going Colston Loveland. I know we're always on this collision course to make it happen, but to me, you're taking him here and you're playing the draft. Certainly at like the running back position and other offensive positions, just sort of as it falls to you. So he's the perfect player for what they want. Exactly the way that they are going about their free agency period. They signed a linebacker that they love that gives them some extra speed in Dre Greenlaw. They signed a safety that they loved in Talanoa Hufanga, who sort of takes like Nicky Manwari off the board there for them. Colston Loveland's the perfect fit for them. So you're up with the Steelers, who 2 biggest needs, wide receiver and corner. They hit both of those needs with Darius Slay and with DK Metcalf. So what are you going to do here?
Okay. If they got Slay, Corey Trice, all right, here's what I think. I have a question for you first.
Mm-hmm.
I know I asked this in our last mock draft.
Mm-hmm.
Do we think Jackson Dart's going in the first round? Because this is of the teams remaining. If he's going anywhere, he's going here.
No.
Okay.
No.
Then I'm going to mix it up on you. And a point that you've made the last couple of days about DK Metcalf and George Pickens, how, yes, Metcalf makes your team better. And this is going to be a whole personality thing. But Metcalf makes your team better because he's DK Metcalf. The skill set is redundant to George Pickens, right? I need something different. Even a Roman Wilson they drafted last year is generally a more vertical type guy, right? I'm going to add more to the receiving core, but I'm going to add someone who's completely different than Pickens and Metcalf. I'll take Luther Burden III here.
Okay. All right. I wondered if you were going to go him or Emeka Egbuka.
You get Ibuka's entirely a possibility and maybe a better fit personality-wise, because now I start to think about Metcalf and Pickens and Luther Burden in one locker room, and and especially if Aaron Rodgers is the one throwing to them eventually here, we've got a whole circus, just like we did with the Jets, of course. But Burden as a player gives them something completely different, gives them that short area, yards after catch possibilities, and a guy who, if Metcalf and Pickens are going to take the top off, gives them the underneath threat to keep picking up first downs after the catch.
The Chargers have been relatively quiet here in free agency. If Tyler Booker is here, I've got to think that he is as good as a Charger. They bring in Dante Jackson. They bring in Najee Harris. It's been a more quiet free agency than I think a lot of people expected for the Chargers. But if Booker is here, I think he's going to go to the Chargers.
Can I throw one in?
Sure.
Keep in mind, we've talked about the Rams getting Poona Ford, meaning the Chargers lost him. I think Kenneth Grant would very, very much be on the table here, especially with the Harbaugh connection.
Yeah, I guess I don't disagree.
Because, I mean, I know that there's been a lot of complaints about the Chargers' interior, but is it really bad? Johnson, Bozeman, Pipkins, I know that's not the best in the league, but would it make them go Tyler Booker here as opposed to, because I think there's a big emphasis on this defensive line. They re-signed Tart, they re-signed Khalil Mack, but they still need work to be done in the interior. I think Kenneth Grant would be a real possibility here.
Oh, the Texans signed Laken Tomlinson? Did that happen?
The Texans did?
Hannibal saying that in the chat.
Oh, the chat and their sources.
They do. They're very connected. They got their sources. I'm gonna go Tyler Booker here. I'm still gonna go Tyler Booker.
Tyler Booker.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Booker at 22. Packers at 23. You're up.
23. All right, the Packers are weird. I don't think I'm going offensive line. There's been arguments about the Packers at receiver too. They don't have a number one guy, but they're also not in position to get a number one guy. Jahdae Barron didn't fall this far. I think it's an edge rusher. Which was it? Actually, I'm going to stick with my connection theory. I think it's Donovan Ezeraku here. Jeff Hafley knows him well from the Boston College days. They need help off the edge. They need a pass rusher. If anybody gets hot as a pass rusher, it's Donovan Ezeraku. I think that stand-up, long arm, kind of versatile arsenal, just everything he's got in his pass rush game, I think fits in. And because Jeff Hafley knows him well, I'm sticking to it.
Sorry, sneezed. I think it's the first time that I've ever sneezed live on the show.
Well,
so
there
it was
you go.
Interesting.
That's how you know we've been on for a while.
That's true. I love what the Minnesota Vikings have done in number 24. I think that the flexibility of getting Ryan Kelly and Will Fries and Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave have given them the ability to have that flexibility to trade back and to get more draft picks. We're not going to do trades here. So instead...
Oh, this is easy. I think it's easy.
You think this is Kenneth Grant?
Yep. If they stay here, I think Kenneth Grant's or a Walter Nolan, either one. I think a run stopper to balance out Hargrave and Allen as the pass rushers. I think absolutely it's one of these run stoppers.
Let's go Kenneth Grant. I agree with you. I'm gonna go with Kenneth Grant here, which puts the Texans up now at number 25.
Well, and you put me in a rough spot because even if they have signed Laken Tomlinson, I would think the Texans would be in on a Tyler Booker. I think
brother.
Yeah.
Josh Simmons is sitting right there.
Oh, they need a tackle too, don't they?
This is easy.
Yeah, it's going to have to be. It's almost for as much as honestly, I think there are real debates about him or Connerly. I think that the league thinks higher of Simmons and his ceiling. Because they now a new need is left tackle. Yep, Josh Simmons, let it rip.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that is the correct choice.
Yep.
The Rams have two players that I would be very intrigued with getting into their defense. Jalen Walker is one of them. Nicky Manwari is the other. I think I would go Jalen Walker because then it would be Jalen Walker, Omar Spates, and then the front seven that we have talked about before. So I don't know if Jalen Walker is going to make it all the way down here in the first round, but even if he sort of wants to be viewed as a linebacker, but I at least trust the Los Angeles Rams to get the most out of him wherever that position is going to be in the NFL. They're going to just maximize his speed in any possible way they can. So I'll go Jalen Walker, the linebacker from Georgia here at 26.
Yeah, I think there's some fun scheme possibilities there too. When you think about what they used to do with Aaron Donald getting into a five-man front on passing downs, I think Walker could actually step down and be that fifth guy, and you've got him on one edge and Verse on the other. Maybe that is the right place for kind of a hybrid role for him there. I actually don't hate that at all. It's been hard for me to find the ideal spot for Jalen Walker. That might not be a bad move because he can do a little bit of both. The Ravens, they don't need a left tackle. That's the good news.
That is good news. It's good news.
Is it an edge rusher? Is it a weapon? I think I'm almost between those top two guys on the board right there in Green and Ibuka.
I think that's probably the conversation here for the Ravens. Yeah.
If Tyler Booker was here too, I would have thought about that because they lost Makari in free agency also. This could be a Tyler Booker spot.
Would this be a Donovan Jackson spot? Do we think Donovan Jackson's getting in the first round? I think the league likes him a lot.
They do like him a lot, but I don't know that he's going ahead of these other guys. But they also like to live with all those tight ends on the field anyway.
Igbuka will block for you though. Like if I feel like he's a Baltimore Raven type of a dude.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, and it gives him some versatility.
Let's see. Yeah, is anybody in chat saying something?
What do you got?
Donovan Jackson or Mike Green. Mike Green in purple would be unreal.
Mike Green could work. I mean, he's super talented.
Ravens need O-line. Lamar needs more time. It seems like the chat's saying either Donovan Jackson or Mike Green.
Plug in at left guard. You kept Stanley. Let's do it. Let's get trendy. Let's go Donovan Jackson.
Okay.
I could.
Wait. Over Gray Zabel as well, because Zabel is also in the conversation.
Yeah, I think so. I think the league right now might have a higher opinion of Jackson than Zabel. I know we like Zabel a lot, and I think in the right fit. I mean, don't even be shocked if, say, Houston or Minnesota were to take him if they stay at that pick, or I think Zabel could be a very nice target in the 30s. So I think we'll go with that. We will go with Donovan Jackson. I can't find him. Why can't I find him?
He's listed as a tackle.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, that won't be the case anyway.
Yeah.
Donovan Jackson. Okay, cool.
Okay. Scroll down. Who we got? What are the remaining teams? We'll go kind of rapid fire here.
Detroit. You have Detroit next.
Okay. Ooh. So they signed DJ Reed. Mike Green, right? I mean, like I can't be totally overthinking this. I mean, like it's got to be Mike Green.
I think that makes a boatload of sense. I got nothing against that.
Yeah, Mike Green makes it here. We're going Mike Green. We're doing Mike Green. We have to get Nicky Manwari out of the first round. Like one of us has to pick Nicky Manwari here with these last couple of games.
I'll do it right now with Washington because they were in on Javon Holland.
Nice.
They were in on Javon Holland, didn't quite get him. I think Dan Quinn would love Nicky Manwari. I think that's the exact type of safety that he likes. You think about the old Cam Chancellor days in Seattle. I think that makes a ton of sense.
Okay, all right. Quinn, can you scroll down for us?
Buffalo is next.
No, on the team. Yeah, team side. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Nope, I still can't see it. It's still zoomed in.
You've got the Buffalo Bills at 30.
Okay. Bills added Josh Palmer. I like the additions that they brought back. Added Michael Hoyt. Walter Nolan's here. This is an easy Walter Nolan spot. With a league like Darius Alexander
or Derek Harmon.
No, I'm going. Now Walter Nolan. I
don't think Alexander's going first round.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. That's what I'm going with there.
Cool.
Kansas City Chiefs.
Kansas City. You had mentioned about their offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe still looking for a left guard. Maybe is it a Gray Zabel spot?
Ooh, Gray Zabel?
Is it a Gray Zabel spot, or am I going D line? Because if Zabel goes in there, he's playing left guard. He's not going to play center.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if they would draft a left guard that early.
Then I'm going defensive line.
Who would you go with, Derek Harmon?
It's two guys. Two guys jump out at me. I think it's either Harmon or it's.
I wonder if they'd be in on Tyleek, because Tyleek's the type of interior defensive lineman that they would need now.
That's reasonable too. The big run stopper, Harmon, Tyleek, or even Scorton off the edge. Any of those?
Oh yeah. Those are all three good choices. I'm gonna see if the chat's got any opinions there, one way or the other. Nope, nobody's talking about.
I'm gonna take Harmon. I think the league is very high on Harmon. There's still a chance he goes in the top 25. I'll go Harmon, and you've got Philadelphia to finish it. Ibuka's an option. I still think Ibuka's an option as a third guy. Hell yeah.
Maybe.
Scorton.
I'm thinking Scorton or Alexander. You don't think
Hold up.
You think
real quick, one more thing, and I know it's not quite the same defense. They did just trade C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Do we reach a little bit here?
I already talked about it earlier in the show, brother.
Safety?
Sidney Brown. He's plugging right in.
Wait, say again?
Not worried about it. Brown.
Sidney Brown. Sorry. Okay, so maybe they wait. I was thinking about maybe it's like, do we get a Xavier Watts here or somebody like that at 32?
Can I see edge rusher? Can I see? Can we go to edge rusher here, Quinn? Let me see the full edge rush situation. I think Scorton's probably the play.
I think so. I think that would fit in well. I'm with you on that.
A little bit of a bigger guy. I mean, you got Jalix Hunt, you got Nolan Smith. They can be stand-up guys for you. Nick Scorton can kick inside a little bit, play a little 4-eye technique if you want him to. When you're going odd front stuff, we're going with Nick Scorton there for the Philadelphia Eagles.
I dig it.
There it is, folks. The mid-free agency spontaneous mock draft there for you. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Man, that was fun. A lot of great stuff. A lot of exciting times. A lot of exciting last couple of hours that we've had every single year. It's the same thing with the NFL. It's the greatest reality TV show for a reason. So if you guys want to check out all of the moves that have been made over the period of free agency, or the tampering period, I guess I should say, going over to PFF.com. Use the PFF free agency tracker. Plus, we've got a lot of different pages. Like, it's not just that one. We've also got a free agency ranking page. We have a best available page. So we are your go-to source when it comes to all the free agency tracking, when it comes to the contracts, sorting it by team, sorting by best available. And then over the next couple of days, we will be updating the PFF mock draft simulator with those updated team needs. So we're going to be getting to all of that stuff to where, all right, we're having these free agent conversations. Not only does that change how teams are looking at 2025, but also it's a little bit before that. How are they adjusting those draft strategies, just like we did here at the tail end of the show? So make sure that you got a PFF subscription so you can do as many mock drafts as possible. We'll be updating those team needs over the next couple of days. Dalton, I think you're back tomorrow. I think you're back doing more free agency coverage. We're going to have a couple more shows doing free agency coverage as the week goes on and the new league year turns around. But we're also going to be doing a lot of like individual videos too. I know Dalton's very excited about digging into specific player team connections that we had here from free agency. So we're going to have a lot of those deeper dive stuff, doing some film breakdown stuff, some analytical breakdown stuff, and tell you how these new players will fit with their new organizations. For Dalton Wasserman, for everybody behind the glass, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying thank you guys so much for watching and listening and getting in the chat. We had so much fun with you over the last couple of days. Let's keep it going throughout free agency week. Thanks for watching the PFF NFL show. We'll see you next time.